9 years ago, I threw a Johns Hopkins full-ride scholarship into the trash to raise my brother Tyler's newborn son. He shoved the crying infant into my arms, claiming his life was over. Fast forward to last Tuesday. Tyler walked into my clinic wearing a tailored suit with his wealthy new wife demanding custody back, like I was just a temporary babysitter. He thought his new money would intimidate me. I just smiled, looked at his wife and said, "Fine, but take the DNA test first." The day the results came back showing a 0% match, I did not call him. I called her. Before I tell you what happened when the truth came out, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to set a hard boundary with toxic family members. It was a Tuesday morning. The lobby of the private medical clinic where I work as the operations manager was quiet. I was at the front reception desk reviewing patient files. The glass doors slid open and the cold morning air rushed in. I did not need to look up to recognize the heavy footsteps. I had not seen my brother in 4 years, but some things you do not forget. Tyler walked in. He wore a custom navy suit and a watch that caught the overhead lights. Beside him stood Maya. She was his wife of 5 years, an African-American woman with a sharp gaze wearing a designer trench coat and carrying herself with the unmistakable posture of a corporate executive. Tyler did not say hello. He marched straight to the marble counter and dropped a thick legal folder right on top of my paperwork. "We are taking Leo home," he said. His voice was loud, projected for the benefit of the patients sitting in the waiting area. "I am filing for full custody." I looked down at the court summons. I did not flinch. I picked up the document and scanned the first page. Tyler was playing a role. He stood tall, shoulders squared, presenting himself as the responsible father, rescuing his son from a lesser environment. Maya watched me. Her eyes held a mixture of pity and disdain. Tyler told me everything she said, her tone smooth and measured. "We know you care about Leo, but this arrangement is no longer appropriate. We can give him the life he deserves. Private school, a proper home. It is time to let go, Chloe." I set the folder down and looked at my brother. "A proper home," I repeated. "You mean unlike the home you abandoned 9 years ago? The day you showed up at my dorm room crying, begging me to take your 2-week-old baby so your future would not be ruined. The day I had to call Johns Hopkins and withdraw my enrollment because you ran away." Tyler shifted his weight. A brief flash of panic crossed his eyes before he masked it. He glanced at Maya, making sure she was buying his act. "You were struggling, Chloe." He lied, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I let you watch him because you begged me. I provided for both of you. But he is my son, and he needs his father now." I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He had not sent a single dollar or attended a single parent-teacher conference in 9 years. Yet here he was standing in my clinic painting me as the delusional aunt. Maya stepped forward, placing her hand on the counter. She leaned in close so the waiting patients could not hear. "We do not want to drag you through court," she whispered. "You cannot afford to fight our legal team." She reached into her designer handbag and withdrew a small slip of paper. She slid it across the marble surface until it touched my hand. I looked down. It was a certified bank check made out to my name. The amount was $50,000. "Take the money," Maya whispered, her eyes locking onto mine. "Step aside quietly and let my husband have his son. Do not make this ugly." I did not tear up the check. Movies teach us to rip up bribe money to preserve our pride, but real life teaches you that a paper trail is a weapon. I folded the heavy banknote and slid it into my blazer pocket. Tyler turned and walked out of the clinic with his arm wrapped securely around Maya, guiding her through the glass doors like a protective shield. I watched them drive away in a sleek black sedan. Tyler had made a fatal miscalculation. He assumed his new wealthy wife and I would never speak without him in the room. He relied on the old dynamic where I stayed quiet and absorbed his messes. I walked back to my desk and opened my laptop. It took me less than 2 minutes to locate Maya on her consulting firm website. Senior partner, Stanford graduate, a woman who built her career on analyzing data and identifying corporate fraud. Her professional email and direct office line were listed right there. I did not call Tyler to scream. I did not leave voicemails threatening legal action. I sent one direct message to Maya using the contact information I found. The text was simple and gave her no room to hide. "Do not let your husband use your money to cover his cowardice. Meet me at the roasting company on 5th Street at noon. Come alone, or I hand this $50,000 check straight to a fraud investigator." The typing indicator bubbled on my screen for 3 long minutes. Then a single word came back. "Fine." I arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early. It was a weekday, and the place was mostly empty, filled only with the low hum of an espresso machine and rain tapping against the front window. I chose a small table in the far corner. I placed a thick, worn leather binder on the table right next to my cup of black coffee. Maya walked in exactly at noon. She did not wear the trench coat anymore, but her posture remained rigid. She scanned the room, spotted me, and marched over. She sat down across from me without offering a greeting. She crossed her arms and kept her designer handbag on her lap, creating a physical barrier between us. "I am only here because I want this resolved today," she stated. Her tone was clinical and detached. "Tyler warned me you might try something like this. He told me you have a history of erratic behavior." I leaned back in my chair. Erratic behavior. That is a fascinating diagnosis. "What else did my brother tell you about me, Maya?" She lifted her chin. She was determined to defend the man she married. "He told me the truth, Chloe. He told me that 9 years ago you suffered a severe psychological break. You became obsessed with the idea of motherhood. When his previous girlfriend abandoned him and left the baby, you manipulated the situation. You took Leo and threatened to accuse Tyler of neglect if he tried to intervene. He stepped back to keep the peace and protect the child from a chaotic legal battle." I listened to the story. It was a masterpiece of fiction. Tyler had inverted the entire narrative, turning his cowardly abandonment into an act of noble sacrifice. "And the money?" I asked, keeping my voice dangerously quiet. "Did he mention how I survived?" Maya offered a tight, patronizing smile. "He told me he has been sending you $4,000 a month for the last 9 years. He said he funded your life so Leo would not suffer while you played house. He showed me the bank transfer receipts." I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out the $50,000 check she had handed me an hour earlier. I placed it face up on the table between us. I tapped the signature line. "You analyze corporate mergers for a living, Maya. You make a living looking for financial discrepancies. I want you to look at this binder." I unclasped the leather binder and flipped it open. I slid the first stack of papers across the wooden table. Maya glanced down but refused to touch them. "These are supermarket receipts from 2015, I said. "Look at the items. Discount baby formula, generic diapers, canned soup. Notice the payment method. My debit card declining due to insufficient funds. Here is an eviction notice from my landlord when Leo was 8 months old because I had to choose between paying rent and paying for his pediatric asthma treatments." Maya frowned. Her eyes darted from my face to the faded thermal paper. "Anyone can fake a financial struggle," she countered, though her voice lost a fraction of its edge. I turned to the next section of the binder. I pushed a stack of official bank statements toward her. "These are my certified banking records for the last decade. Every deposit and withdrawal is documented here. I want you to find the $4,000 monthly transfers from my brother. Go ahead, find them." Maya hesitated. She reached out and pulled the statements closer. Her eyes scanned the columns of numbers. She flipped one page, then another. Her manicured finger traced the deposit lines. Nothing. Only meager paychecks from a diner where I worked night shifts and small direct deposits from a hospital clerical job. "Tyler showed me the transfer confirmations," she insisted, but the certainty in her eyes was fracturing. "The routing numbers were on his laptop. He showed you fake documents," I replied flatly. "Or he is transferring your money into a private account he controls and telling you it goes to me. You are a consultant, Maya. Audit your own husband." She swallowed hard. The defensive wall she brought into the cafe was crumbling under the weight of hard data. But the final blow had not landed yet. I reached into the very back of the binder. I pulled out a single sheet of heavy ivory paper. The edges were worn from years of being folded and unfolded. The official crest of Johns Hopkins University was printed at the top. "Read the date," I instructed. Maya picked up the letter. Her eyes moved across the text. "September 2015, she read aloud. "Dear Ms. Bennett, we have received your formal request to withdraw your enrollment and decline the full-ride presidential scholarship for our pre-medical program. We understand that sudden family obligations and the assumption of full custody of a minor dependent have altered your path." Her voice faltered. The paper trembled slightly in her grip. "Tyler did not step back to protect Leo," I said. The words tasted like ash, but I forced them out. "Tyler knocked on my dorm room door at midnight. He handed me a crying infant and a diaper bag. He told me he was too young to be a father and that his life would be over if he stayed. He got back in his car and drove to California. I spent the next morning on the phone with the admissions office, throwing away my entire future so his son would not end up in the foster care system." Maya stared at the Johns Hopkins letter. She traced the embossed crest with her thumb. The reality of the situation washed over her face. She was a smart woman. She knew a forged bank receipt when she thought about it, but she could not argue with a university seal and a decade of documented poverty. "He lied," she whispered. The realization hit her like a physical strike. Her husband, the man she married 5 years ago, had built their entire foundation on a grotesque deception. "He has been pulling money from our joint accounts for years, claiming it was child support for you." I did not offer her comfort. I needed answers. Why now, I asked. "Tyler ignored his son for 9 years. He never sent a birthday card. He never asked for a photograph. Why did he suddenly walk into my clinic today demanding full custody?" Maya looked up. Her sharp executive gaze was replaced by something cold and calculating. She was no longer protecting Tyler. She was assessing the damage he had done to her. "He told me we needed to establish primary custody immediately," she said, her voice dropping to a low hum. "He said it was an emergency." Why I pressed. What changed? Maya clasped her hands together. The knuckles turned white. "Tyler told me he received a letter from a probate attorney last week. The boy biological grandfather passed away in New York." I frowned. "Tyler father passed away years ago." "Not Tyler father," Maya corrected. "The mother father, Jessica father. The man who just died was a commercial real estate developer. Tyler told me the estate is tied up in a mandatory bloodline trust." Maya leaned across the table. Her eyes locked onto mine. "Tyler needs physical and legal custody of Leo right now because that trust fund distributes $10 million to the child primary guardian by the end of the month." I did not tear up the check. Movies teach us to rip up bribe money to preserve our pride, but real life teaches you that a paper trail is a weapon. I folded the heavy banknote and slid it into my blazer pocket. Tyler turned and walked out of the clinic with his arm wrapped securely around Maya, guiding her through the glass doors like a protective shield. I watched them drive away in a sleek black sedan. Tyler had made a fatal miscalculation. He assumed his new wealthy wife and I would never speak without him in the room. He relied on the old dynamic where I stayed quiet and absorbed his messes. I walked back to my desk and opened my laptop. It took me less than 2 minutes to locate Maya on her consulting firm website. Senior partner, Stanford graduate. A woman who built her career on analyzing data and identifying corporate fraud. Her professional email and direct office line were listed right there. I did not call Tyler to scream. I did not leave voicemails threatening legal action. I sent one direct message to Maya using the contact information I found. The text was simple and gave her no room to hide. "Do not let your husband use your money to cover his cowardice. Meet me at the roasting company on 5th Street at noon. Come alone, or I hand this $50,000 check straight to a fraud investigator." The typing indicator bubbled on my screen for 3 long minutes. Then a single word came back. "Fine." I arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early. It was a weekday, and the place was mostly empty, filled only with the low hum of an espresso machine and rain tapping against the front window. I chose a small table in the far corner. I placed a thick, worn leather binder on the table right next to my cup of black coffee. Maya walked in exactly at noon. She did not wear the trench coat anymore, but her posture remained rigid. She scanned the room, spotted me, and marched over. She sat down across from me without offering a greeting. She crossed her arms and kept her designer handbag on her lap, creating a physical barrier between us. "I am only here because I want this resolved today," she stated. Her tone was clinical and detached. "Tyler warned me you might try something like this. He told me you have a history of erratic behavior." I leaned back in my chair. Erratic behavior. That is a fascinating diagnosis. What else did my brother tell you about me, Maya? She lifted her chin. She was determined to defend the man she married. "He told me the truth, Chloe. He told me that 9 years ago you suffered a severe psychological break. You became obsessed with the idea of motherhood. When his previous girlfriend abandoned him and left the baby, you manipulated the situation. You took Leo and threatened to accuse Tyler of neglect if he tried to intervene. He stepped back to keep the peace and protect the child from a chaotic legal battle. I listened to the story. It was a masterpiece of fiction. Tyler had inverted the entire narrative, turning his cowardly abandonment into an act of noble sacrifice. And the money, I asked, keeping my voice dangerously quiet. Did he mention how I survived? Maya offered a tight, patronizing smile. He told me he has been sending you $4,000 a month for the last 9 years. He said he funded your life so Leo would not suffer while you played house. He showed me the bank transfer receipts. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out the $50,000 check she had handed me an hour earlier. I placed it face up on the table between us. I tapped the signature line. You analyze corporate mergers for a living, Maya. You make a living looking for financial discrepancies. I want you to look at this binder. I unclasped the leather binder and flipped it open. I slid the first stack of papers across the wooden table. Maya glanced down but refused to touch them. These are supermarket receipts from 2015, I said. Look at the items. Discount baby formula, generic diapers, canned soup. Notice the payment method. My debit card declining due to insufficient funds. Here is an eviction notice from my landlord when Leo was 8 months old because I had to choose between paying rent and paying for his pediatric asthma treatments. Maya frowned. Her eyes darted from my face to the faded thermal paper. Anyone can fake a financial struggle, she countered, though her voice lost a fraction of its edge. I turned to the next section of the binder. I pushed a stack of official bank statements toward her. These are my certified banking records for the last decade. Every deposit and withdrawal is documented here. I want you to find the $4,000 monthly transfers from my brother. Go ahead. Find them. Maya hesitated. She reached out and pulled the statements closer. Her eyes scanned the columns of numbers. She flipped one page, then another. Her manicured finger traced the deposit lines. Nothing. Only meager paychecks from a diner where I worked night shifts and small direct deposits from a hospital clerical job. Tyler showed me the transfer confirmations she insisted, but the certainty in her eyes was fracturing. The routing numbers were on his laptop. He showed you fake documents, I replied flatly. Or he is transferring your money into a private account he controls and telling you it goes to me. You are a consultant, Maya. Audit your own husband. She swallowed hard. The defensive wall she brought into the cafe was crumbling under the weight of hard data, but the final blow had not landed yet. I reached into the very back of the binder. I pulled out a single sheet of heavy ivory paper. The edges were worn from years of being folded and unfolded. The official crest of Johns Hopkins University was printed at the top. Read the date, I instructed. Maya picked up the letter. Her eyes moved across the text. September 2015, she read aloud. Dear Ms. Bennett, we have received your formal request to withdraw your enrollment and decline the full-ride presidential scholarship for our pre-medical program. We understand that sudden family obligations and the assumption of full custody of a minor dependent have altered your path. Her voice faltered. The paper trembled slightly in her grip. Tyler did not step back to protect Leo, I said. The words tasted like ash, but I forced them out. Tyler knocked on my dorm room door at midnight. He handed me a crying infant and a diaper bag. He told me he was too young to be a father and that his life would be over if he stayed. He got back in his car and drove to California. I spent the next morning on the phone with the admissions office, throwing away my entire future so his son would not end up in the foster care system. Maya stared at the Johns Hopkins letter. She traced the embossed crest with her thumb. The reality of the situation washed over her face. She was a smart woman. She knew a forged bank receipt when she thought about it, but she could not argue with a university seal and a decade of documented poverty. He lied, she whispered. The realization hit her like a physical strike. Her husband, the man she married 5 years ago, had built their entire foundation on a grotesque deception. He has been pulling money from our joint accounts for years, claiming it was child support for you. I did not offer her comfort. I needed answers. Why now, I asked. Tyler ignored his son for 9 years. He never sent a birthday card. He never asked for a photograph. Why did he suddenly walk into my clinic today demanding full custody? Maya looked up. Her sharp executive gaze was replaced by something cold and calculating. She was no longer protecting Tyler. She was assessing the damage he had done to her. He told me we needed to establish primary custody immediately, she said, her voice dropping to a low hum. He said it was an emergency. Why I pressed. What changed? Maya clasped her hands together. The knuckles turned white. Tyler told me he received a letter from a probate attorney last week. The boy's biological grandfather passed away in New York. I frowned. Tyler's father passed away years ago. Not Tyler's father, Maya corrected. The mother father, Jessica father. The man who just died was a commercial real estate developer. Tyler told me the estate is tied up in a mandatory bloodline trust. Maya leaned across the table. Her eyes locked on to mine. Tyler needs physical and legal custody of Leo right now because that trust fund distributes $10 million to the child primary guardian by the end of the month. $10 million. The number hung in the cafe air long after Maya grabbed her designer bag and walked out into the rain. Tyler did not want a son. Tyler wanted a payday. He was using the child I raised to unlock a dead real estate mogul trust fund. I paid for the coffees, left a cash tip on the table, and pulled out my phone. I dialed David, my affordable family lawyer, who operated out of a cramped office above a dry cleaner. I told him to accept the invitation for pre-trial mediation. 3 days later, we sat in a sterile conference room at the county family court building. The walls were painted a dull, institutional gray. A heavy mahogany table divided the room. On one side sat Tyler, radiating the arrogant confidence of a man who believed his checkbook had already won the war. He wore a charcoal gray suit and leaned back in his leather chair, tapping an expensive pen against his notepad. Beside him sat his high-priced family attorney, a man named Sterling, who charged more per hour than I made in a week. Maya sat to Tyler's right. She wore a tailored black dress and kept her hands folded neatly in her lap. To the mediator, she looked like the supportive stepmother, ready to welcome a child into her luxurious life. But I knew better. I saw the tension in her jaw. I noticed how she kept a deliberate 2-inch distance between her shoulder and her husband's arm. She was playing her part, waiting to see how deep Tyler would dig his own grave. The mediator, a seasoned judge named Harrison, sat at the head of the table adjusting his reading glasses. He looked over the preliminary filings and sighed. The paperwork indicates a voluntary transfer of guardianship, he said, his voice carrying the rough edge of a man who handled messy family disputes all day. Mr. Bennett, you are seeking full physical and legal custody of the minor Leo. Tyler offered a practiced, humble nod. That is correct, Your Honor. He placed a hand on his chest, mimicking a man burdened by duty. For 9 years, I allowed my sister to care for Leo because she suffered from severe emotional instability. I provided the financial backing so she could find purpose in raising him. But Leo is growing up. He needs a father. He needs structure. Maya and I are prepared to enroll him at the Crestview Academy this fall. We have a spacious home in the suburbs. We can offer him a life my sister simply cannot afford. He spoke with such smooth conviction that David, my lawyer, shifted uncomfortably in his seat beside me. Tyler glanced at me and offered a patronizing smirk. He believed the $50,000 check was sitting in my bank account. He assumed I was sitting here in my off-the-rack blazer ready to surrender because I took his wife bribe money. The mediator turned his attention to me. Ms. Bennett, your brother claims you are willing to step aside. Do you contest his petition for custody today? David leaned in, ready to argue on my behalf, but I held up a hand, stopping him. I kept my posture straight and my hands resting flat on the mahogany table. I looked directly into my brother's eyes. I do not contest the transfer of guardianship, I said. My voice was steady and cool. I am willing to let Tyler assume full legal responsibility for Leo. Tyler smirked, widening his stance. He shot a triumphant look at Maya. His expensive attorney began organizing his files, preparing to draft the final agreement. The room felt like a finished game. Tyler had won. He was inches away from securing the child and the $10 million trust fund. But there is one minor administrative detail we need to address first. I continued cutting through the sound of shuffling papers. The mediator raised an eyebrow. What detail, Ms. Bennett? I pulled a single sheet of paper from my folder and slid it across the table. It was a certified copy of Leo birth certificate. Tyler Bennett has never been listed on this document. For 9 years, the space for the father name has remained blank. Since my brother is requesting a legal transfer of a minor child for the express purpose of integrating him into his estate and acting as his biological parent, the state requires definitive proof of standing. I paused, letting the silence stretch across the room. I request a court-ordered DNA test to establish legal paternity before any transfer of custody takes place. The temperature in the room plummeted. The smug smile vanished from Tyler's face as if it had been wiped away by a physical blow. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving his skin a sickly pale hue. His expensive pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the hardwood floor. "That is ridiculous," he stammered, his voice pitching higher than normal. "That is a waste of time. I am his father. Everyone knows I am his father." His attorney Sterling frowned clearly, caught off guard by his client's sudden panic. "Tyler, this is a standard procedural request," the lawyer whispered, leaning close. "A simple cheek swab will expedite the judge approval. We can have it done downstairs in 20 minutes. "No," Tyler snapped. He slammed his fist onto the table, causing the water glasses to rattle. "I will not subject myself to unnecessary bureaucratic hurdles. She is stalling." He pointed an accusing finger at me, his composure fracturing into jagged pieces. "She is just trying to drag this out to extort more money from me. She wants another payout. Do not listen to her." I sat motionless, watching him unravel. A man claiming his rightful son should welcome a DNA test as the ultimate proof. Tyler's reaction was the exact opposite. He was sweating. His breathing turned shallow and rapid. He looked like a cornered animal searching for an exit. Maya turned her head slowly to look at her husband. The slight narrowing of her eyes was the only movement she made. She was a woman who investigated corporate fraud. She recognized the scent of a liar backed into a corner. If Tyler was the biological father, a cheek swab was a minor inconvenience. His terror in this conference room validated every suspicion I had planted in her mind at the coffee shop. He was terrified of the science. "Ms. Bennett has a valid legal point," the mediator said, his tone shifting from bored to authoritative. "Without your name on the birth certificate, the court cannot grant you primary custody without establishing biological relation. It protects the child, and it protects the state." "I am not doing it," Tyler yelled, standing up from his leather chair. "You cannot force a medical procedure on me based on the demands of a bitter sister. I have rights. You are the one petitioning the court." Mr. Bennett, the mediator, replied, his patience evaporating. "If you want the child, you will submit to the test. If you refuse the test, I will dismiss your custody petition right now, and you will leave this building with nothing." Tyler froze. He was trapped between two impossible choices: refuse the test and lose the $10 million trust fund immediately, take the test and risk the results exposing his entire charade. He looked at Maya, desperate for her to intervene, to use her sharp corporate logic to bail him out. Maya did not offer him a lifeline. She picked up her designer handbag and stood. "Do the test, Tyler," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "Prove to the court that you are exactly who you claim to be." Tyler swallowed hard. He looked at the mediator, then at his lawyer, then at me. The hatred in his eyes was palpable. "Fine," he hissed through gritted teeth. "I will do your stupid test." The mediator struck his gavel against the wooden block. "Excellent. The court orders a mandatory DNA swab for Tyler Bennett and the minor child. The results will be submitted directly to my chamber. We are adjourned until the lab report is finalized." I gathered my files and walked out of the conference room. My lawyer David patted my shoulder in the hallway, praising the strategic move, but I barely heard him. I needed to get to my car and return to the clinic. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the courthouse and stepped out into the damp afternoon air. The parking lot was sprawling and half empty. I unlocked my modest sedan and reached for the door handle. A heavy hand slammed against the metal right above my fingers, pushing the door shut. I spun around. Tyler was standing inches from my face. He had ditched his lawyer and left his wife inside the building to track me down. The polished, successful father routine was entirely gone. His tie was loosened. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscles twitched. "You think you are so smart?" he snarled, his breath hot against my cheek. "You think you can play games with me and win?" I did not back away. I stared straight into his furious eyes. "It is not a game, Tyler. It is a medical procedure. If you are his father, you have nothing to worry about." He leaned in closer, pressing his forearm against the window of my car, trapping me in the narrow space between the vehicles. "You listen to me, you ungrateful bitch," he hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You just dug your own grave. I am going to take that boy. I am going to take everything from you. And when I am done, you will wish you had taken that check and disappeared." He stepped back, adjusting his custom suit jacket. He shot me one last warning glare before turning and marching toward my parked luxury SUV. He thought intimidation would force me into submission. He thought fear would silence me. He did not realize his threat meant nothing. The wheels were already in motion. Science does not care about threats, and DNA does not lie. The clock was ticking, and Tyler had no idea what was waiting for him at the end of the countdown. Less than 24 hours had passed since the courthouse parking lot confrontation. I was sitting at my clinic desk sorting patient intake forms when my cell phone vibrated across the smooth wood surface. The caller identification displayed the name of the elementary school Leo attended. A call from the school in the middle of the day never brings good news. I answered the phone. The school principal spoke in a hushed, urgent tone. She told me to come to her office immediately. She explained that a representative from Child Protective Services was sitting in the building right now interrogating my nephew. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my breathing to remain steady. I asked the principal what the allegations were. She hesitated before relaying the anonymous complaint. The caller claimed I was heavily using narcotics. The caller stated I subjected the boy to constant emotional trauma. The most disturbing lie was a specific, detailed claim that I locked the 9-year-old boy inside a dark storage shed behind my apartment building whenever I wanted to punish him. Tyler was moving fast. He realized the impending DNA test would destroy his scheme to steal the trust fund, so he chose a ruthless new tactic. He wanted to destroy me first. If the state welfare agency removed Leo from my custody, pending a long investigation, Tyler could swoop in as the concerned biological relative. He could petition the court for emergency temporary placement before the laboratory results even returned. I did not panic. When you spend 9 years raising a child under the constant shadow of an absent father, you prepare for the worst-case scenario. I reached under my desk and pulled out a heavy fireproof briefcase. I locked my office door and drove straight to the elementary school. The school hallway smelled of floor wax and wet raincoats. I pushed open the heavy wooden door to the main administrative office. Leo sat on a small plastic chair near the reception desk. He was swinging his legs, looking confused and frightened. A woman in a stiff gray pantsuit stood directly in front of him, blocking my path. She held a clipboard and a pen. She introduced herself as Agent Miller from the State Child Welfare Division. Her eyes were flat, cold, and highly judgmental. She looked at me like she had already decided I was a monster. She held up a hand instructing me to step back. She stated she was conducting an active investigation into severe child endangerment, and I was the primary suspect. I ignored her raised hand. I looked past her shoulder right at Leo. I smiled warmly and told him everything was fine and that he should go back to his classroom. The principal quickly escorted the boy out of the room, leaving me alone with the investigator. I turned my attention back to Agent Miller. I asked her to present the specific allegations. She listed the accusations with a practiced clinical detachment meant to intimidate guilty parents into confessing. She mentioned the drug use, the severe neglect, and the storage shed. She spoke slowly, letting the weight of the potential criminal charges hang in the air. I did not flinch. I placed my heavy briefcase on the principal mahogany desk and clicked the dual metal locks open. I pulled out the first thick folder and slid it across the smooth desk surface toward her. I told her to open it and examine the pediatric medical records. I pointed out that every single vaccination was administered on time. Every annual wellness check documented a healthy boy in the 95th percentile for height and weight, with 0 signs of physical trauma or malnourishment. I pulled out a second folder containing report cards from kindergarten through 3rd grade. I laid them out side by side. Straight A grades, perfect attendance records, glowing comments from every teacher praising his bright mood and social skills. Finally, I handed her a sealed envelope featuring the official letterhead of a licensed pediatric psychologist. I explained that I requested therapy for Leo 3 years ago when he started asking why his father never sent him birthday cards. I paid for those expensive sessions entirely out of pocket. I instructed Agent Miller to read the therapist assessment. The clinical letter detailed a thriving, well-adjusted child living in a deeply loving and incredibly stable home environment. I looked the investigator straight in the eye. I wanted her to understand exactly who she was accusing. I told her about my actual daily routine. I explained how I worked overnight shifts at the hospital pediatric ward for 4 years, cleaning bedpans and monitoring vital signs, while a trusted elderly neighbor watched Leo sleep. I detailed how I spent my brief lunch breaks hiding in a hospital supply closet, typing essays on a cracked laptop screen to earn my healthcare administration degree. I explained that I survived on discount instant noodles and thrift store clothes so Leo could eat fresh vegetables and wear brand new winter coats. I did all of that so he would never have to spend a single second feeling neglected, let alone locked in a cold storage shed. I built my entire existence around keeping him safe from the very man who abandoned him. Agent Miller stood in silence. She reviewed the pristine medical documents and the glowing academic reports. Her rigid posture slowly relaxed. The harsh judgment in her eyes faded into deep professional embarrassment. She recognized a malicious false report when the overwhelming physical evidence contradicted every single line of the anonymous complaint. Children locked in sheds do not have perfect attendance records and glowing psychological evaluations. She closed the folders and handed them back to me with a sigh. She apologized for the disruption. She told me the case would be officially closed as unfounded within the hour. She assured me the school would receive a notice clearing my name. I packed my documents back into the briefcase. I felt a wave of relief wash over my tired shoulders. The immediate threat was neutralized. But before Agent Miller packed her own bag, she paused at the door. She looked at me with a genuine expression of concern. She warned me to be very careful moving forward. I asked her what she meant by that warning. She lowered her voice, glancing out the window to ensure no one was listening. She revealed the final piece of the anonymous tip. The caller did not just allege physical abuse and drug use. The caller sent a digital photograph to the state welfare agency's secure tip line to back up a much darker accusation. Agent Miller explained that the photograph showed a certified bank check made out to my name. The amount on the check was exactly $50,000. My blood ran cold. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Agent Miller continued. The anonymous tipster claimed I was neglecting the boy because I was preparing to sell full custody of him to a wealthy buyer. The caller accused me of human trafficking. The tipster told the state agency that the $50,000 check was the initial down payment for the illegal purchase of a human child. The investigator gave me a sympathetic nod, advised me to hire a good lawyer, and walked out of the school office. I stood frozen by the desk, gripping the handle of my briefcase. Maya had handed me that exact check yesterday morning in the lobby of my clinic. Only 3 people in the entire world knew that specific piece of paper existed. Me, Maya, and Tyler. The reality of the situation hit me with the force of a freight train. Tyler did not just want to take Leo away from me to secure his trust fund payout. He wanted to ensure I could never fight back. He wanted to send me to federal prison. He framed me for selling a child using his own wife bribe money as the fabricated evidence. He was willing to destroy my entire life, throw me behind bars, and drag a 9-year-old boy through a traumatic state investigation just to secure a payday from a dead billionaire. Tyler thought he had orchestrated the perfect crime. He thought the threat of a human trafficking charge would force me to surrender. He did not realize he had just handed me the very weapon I needed to tear his life apart. The visit from the state investigator changed the entire landscape of the battle. Tyler was no longer just a negligent father trying to reclaim a child for financial gain. I was an active predator trying to put me in a federal prison. My cheap strip mall attorney David was a good man, but he was not equipped for a war of this magnitude. He handled simple divorces and amicable custody arrangements. He did not know how to fight a man willing to fabricate human trafficking charges using his wife bribe money as evidence. I needed a predator of my own. The next morning I drove to my local bank branch. I sat in a plastic chair across from a young teller and instructed him to liquidate my entire savings account. I cashed out the meager retirement fund I had built over 5 years working at the medical clinic. I drained every single dollar I had saved for a future house down payment. The teller handed me a certified cashier check for $22,000. It was everything I owned in the world. I placed the paper in my purse and drove straight to the financial district downtown. Diane Roth operated out of a corner office on the 40th floor of a glass high-rise. She was a forensic family attorney who specialized in high-net-worth divorces and asset recovery. She was the lawyer wealthy women hired when their tech founder husbands tried to hide money in offshore accounts. She charged $900 an hour. She did not offer me a cup of coffee or a glass of water when I sat down in her leather guest chair. She just looked at my files. I pushed the certified check across her sleek mahogany desk. I told her my brother was trying to frame me for a felony to steal a $10 million trust fund attached to my nephew. I told her I did not just want to retain custody. I wanted to tear my brother's life apart piece by piece until he had no place left to hide. Diane looked at the check, then looked at me. She picked up a silver pen and pulled a fresh legal pad toward her. She told me we were going to follow the money. Within 48 hours, Diane filed an aggressive motion for discovery. She bypassed the standard custody questionnaires and submitted a subpoena for 10 years of Tyler personal and business financial records. She demanded every tax return, every credit card statement, every wire transfer, and every bank ledger he had touched since the year Leo was born. We needed to prove to the family court that Tyler had never provided a single cent of child support, thereby invalidating his sudden claim of dedicated fatherhood. Tyler's arrogance proved to be his greatest weakness. He believed he was untouchable because he was married to Maya. He assumed Maya's elite corporate legal team would shield him from any real scrutiny. He also assumed I was bluffing. He complied with the subpoena without a fight. His lawyers delivered gigabytes of digital financial records and boxes of printed statements to Diane's office, assuming we would drown in the paperwork. Tyler thought his tracks were covered. He thought he had outsmarted a clinic manager and a tired single mother. He forgot I had hired a woman who hunted hidden money for a living. It was late Friday night. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Diane's corner office. The city lights blurred through the wet glass. We sat at a long conference table covered in highlighter spreadsheets and glowing laptop screens. Diane had been running Tyler banking data through a specialized financial tracing software for 6 hours. She did not speak much. She just clicked her mouse and cross-referenced routing numbers. She paused her typing and leaned back in her ergonomic chair. She instructed me to come look at her secondary monitor. I walked over and stared at the screen. Diane pointed the tip of her silver pen at a recurring line item on Tyler's primary checking account. On the first day of every single month, exactly $5,000 left his account via a wire transfer. The transfers began shortly after he married Maya 5 years ago and continued without interruption until the present day. Diane reminded me of the story Tyler spun to his wife. Maya sat in the coffee shop and defended her husband because he convinced her he was sending me a generous child support stipend every month to care for Leo. Maya believed she was funding my life. I stared at the screen. I told Diane I had never received a single dime of that money. Diane offered a cold, tight smile. She explained that she knew I had not received it. She ran the clearinghouse data on the destination routing number. The monthly $5,000 wire was not going to a domestic bank account in my name. The software traced the transfer to a holding account located at a private financial institution in the Cayman Islands. Tyler set up an anonymous offshore LLC. He was siphoning money from the joint marital accounts he shared with his wealthy wife, pretending it was noble child support, and hoarding it in a tax haven. He was defrauding Maya right under her nose. The discovery was a lethal weapon. If Maya saw this documentation, her marriage would end in a brutal, high-stakes divorce. Tyler would lose his affluent lifestyle in an instant. I felt a surge of vindication. We had the evidence to destroy his marriage and his credibility in family court. But Diane did not close her laptop. She told me the offshore account was a sloppy amateur trick. She said it was exactly what she expected from a lazy man married to a rich woman. She tapped her pen against the desk. She instructed me to stop looking at the money leaving Tyler's account and start looking at the money entering it. She pulled up a new spreadsheet. It detailed Tyler's income streams for the past 9 years. I knew Tyler worked as a mid-level sales manager for a regional supply firm. His W-2 tax forms confirmed his salary hovered around $90,000 a year. It was a decent living, but it could not support his custom-tailored suits, his luxury car leases, and the secret $5,000 offshore diversions without triggering massive debt. Yet his credit score was pristine. Diane highlighted a column of incoming deposits. She showed me a secondary revenue stream that had nothing to do with his sales job. On the 15th of every month, a direct deposit of $6,000 hit Tyler's personal checking account. These deposits did not start 5 years ago when he married Maya. Diane scrolled to the very top of the ledger. The deposits began exactly 9 years and 1 month ago. They started 30 days after I took Leo into my dorm room. I felt a chill crawl up the back of my neck. Someone had been paying my brother a steady, lucrative salary since the moment he abandoned his son. I asked Diane who was sending the funds. She opened a corporate registry database. She explained that the depositing entity was listed as a blind trust using a post office box in Delaware. It was a classic shell company structure designed to obscure the identity of the person signing the checks. People use Delaware shell companies when they want to move money without leaving a public footprint. But forensic lawyers know how to pierce the corporate veil. Diane cross-referenced the employer identification number with state tax filings and registered agent directories. She bypassed the dummy corporations and traced the hierarchy up to the parent organization. She hit the Enter key, and the final result loaded on her screen. The parent company funding the blind trust was called Sterling Holdings. I stared at the name. My breath caught in my throat. You did not have to work in finance to know that name. Everyone on the East Coast knew that name. Richard Sterling was not just a wealthy businessman. He was a titan. He was a ruthless real estate billionaire who funded state political campaigns, bought up entire city blocks, and destroyed corporate rivals over breakfast. He was a man composed of old money and unyielding power. The silence in the office felt suffocating. The rain continued to batter the glass windows. I looked at Diane. Her sharp, analytical eyes were focused on the screen. She asked the only question that mattered. Why would one of the most powerful billionaires in the country place a 22-year-old deadbeat on a secret payroll the exact same month a child was born? Tyler was not just a cowardly father running from responsibility. He was an employee. He had been collecting a paycheck from a titan of industry for almost a decade. The $10 million trust fund, the forged custody battle, the ruthless attempt to frame me for human trafficking, all of it circled back to a single, inescapable truth. The child sleeping in my apartment was tied to an empire, and Tyler was desperate to cash in before the empire discovered the truth. The revelation of the Sterling Holdings payments hung over me like a dark storm cloud. It changed the fundamental geometry of the entire custody battle. I was no longer fighting a bitter brother over a child. I was fighting a man who operated as a paid operative for a billionaire. I needed the final piece of the puzzle before I could tear his life apart. I needed the DNA results. The mandatory court-ordered paternity test required a sealed chain of custody. The results were delivered directly to the designated medical facility where the swabs were originally taken. I arrived at the clinic at 9 in the morning. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic cleaner and old magazines. The receptionist called my name and directed me toward a sterile consultation room down the hall. I expected Tyler to be sitting in the room radiating his usual arrogant confidence. Instead, his high-priced attorney Sterling sat alone at a small round table. The lawyer wore a sharp gray suit and checked his expensive watch, displaying clear annoyance at the inconvenience of the appointment. Tyler had not bothered to show up. He sent a proxy to collect the biological proof of his fatherhood. It was the ultimate display of detachment. A clinic administrator walked into the room carrying a heavy manila envelope bearing a red tamper evidence seal. She verified my identification and the attorney credentials. She handed the envelope across the table and stepped out, closing the door behind her. Sterling reached for the package, but I placed my hand firmly over the thick paper. I informed him that I was the current legal guardian of the minor child involved in the test. I stated I would be the one breaking the seal. The lawyer scoffed, withdrew his hand, and leaned back in his chair. He muttered that it did not matter who opened the envelope because the judge would formalize the custody transfer by the end of the week, regardless of the procedural delay. He operated under the assumption that the test was a mere formality. He believed his client. He believed Tyler was the biological father. I ignored him. I slid my fingernail under the red seal and ripped the thick paper open. I pulled out a stack of dense laboratory reports. The first few pages were filled with complex genetic markers graphs and technical jargon detailing allele frequencies. I skipped the data tables and flipped directly to the final summary page. I located the bolded conclusion section at the bottom of the document. I read the single definitive sentence: "The probability of paternity is 0%. The words did not immediately process in my mind. I read the sentence a second time, then a third. 0%. The man who handed me a crying infant 9 years ago and forced me to withdraw from Johns Hopkins University shared no genetic material with the child. Tyler was not the father. He had never been the father. The implications hit me like a physical blow to the chest. If Tyler was not the biological parent, why did he possess the baby in the first place? Why did he beg me to take the child, claiming his life would be ruined by the burden of fatherhood? And most importantly, why was the powerful Sterling family paying a man who had no biological connection to the child $6,000 a month for nearly a decade? I stared at the paper. The pieces of the puzzle violently crashed together, forming a horrifying picture. Tyler did not abandon his own son. Tyler stole someone else's child, dumped him on his teenage sister to avoid the daily labor of parenting, and used the boy's mere existence to extort a billionaire. The $10 million trust fund was not an inheritance meant for Tyler bloodline. It was a payout meant for the actual biological heir. Tyler wanted physical custody now because he needed to present the child to the probate court to collect the massive payout before anyone realized the genetic truth. I looked across the table. Sterling was checking his phone, oblivious to the catastrophic reality resting in my hands. I slid the final page of the laboratory report across the smooth table surface. I told the attorney he should call his client and advise him to secure a criminal defense lawyer. Sterling frowned, picked up the paper, and adjusted his reading glasses. His eyes scanned the bolded conclusion. The annoyance on his face evaporated instantly, replaced by stark professional terror. A high-priced family lawyer does not like being dragged into fraudulent court petitions involving fake paternity and hidden trust funds. The attorney realized his client had lied to him, perjured himself in a sworn affidavit, and attempted to defraud a state judge. Sterling dropped the paper on the table, grabbed his briefcase, and rushed out of the consultation room without saying a single word. He was running to distance himself from the impending legal explosion. I did not chase him. I pulled my phone from my purse and dialed Maya's direct office line. I did not call my lawyer. I did not call the police. I called the woman whose pride and bank accounts had been weaponized against me. Maya answered on the second ring. Her tone was sharp and hurried, indicating she was likely in the middle of a corporate strategy meeting. She told me she did not have time for games and demanded to know why I was calling her during business hours. I kept my voice dead level. I told her I was standing in the medical clinic holding the certified court-ordered DNA results. I stated the probability of paternity was 0%. The line went completely silent. I could hear the faint hum of her office air conditioning in the background. I did not let the silence stretch. I struck while the shock was fresh. I told Maya the entire truth without softening the edges. I explained that her husband was not a cowardly man trying to reclaim his biological son. I told her he was a fraud who had spent 5 years siphoning her money into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, while simultaneously collecting a secret monthly salary from a billionaire shell corporation. I laid out the extortion plot, the fake child support receipts, and the fake narrative he spun to secure her elite legal protection. Maya was a woman who built her entire identity on being the smartest person in the room. She was a senior partner who uncovered financial deception for a living. Hearing that she had been comprehensively conned by the man sharing her bed shattered her reality. The proud, wealthy executive realized her entire 5-year marriage was a calculated transaction. Tyler did not just cheat on her. He made her an unwitting accomplice in a decade-long extortion scheme involving a kidnapped child and a dead billionaire. Her breathing hitched over the phone line. The polished executive armor cracked, revealing the raw fury of a deeply betrayed woman. I asked her where Tyler was right now. I heard the sound of a heavy desk drawer sliding open. I heard papers shuffling frantically. Maya's voice returned, but the professional polish was entirely gone. It was replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. She told me Tyler had left their suburban house early that morning, claiming he had an urgent meeting with his lawyer regarding the custody transfer. She said he mentioned securing some travel documents for a sudden business trip related to the trust fund payout. I heard a sharp intake of breath. The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed through the phone speaker as Maya violently pulled something apart. "Chloe," she shouted, her voice cracking with terror. He took the passport. I froze. I asked her what passport she was talking about. Maya practically screamed into the receiver. "Tyler convinced me to help him secure an expedited passport for Leo last month so we could take him on a family vacation to Europe right after the custody transfer. I kept it locked in my home office safe. The safe is empty." Tyler took the passport and a large sum of cash. The blood drained from my face. Tyler did not show up to the clinic to receive the DNA results because he already knew what they would say. He knew the 0% match would hit the court docket by noon. He knew the fraud would be exposed and the extortion scheme would collapse. He was not planning to attend a custody hearing. He was planning an extraction. If he could not secure the $10 million trust fund legally through the family court, he would take the child out of the country and leverage his physical control of the billionaire heir for a final massive ransom. Maya's voice was frantic, screaming through the speaker. "Chloe, get to the elementary school right now. He left the house an hour ago. He is going to take the boy." I dropped the phone on the passenger seat and slammed my foot on the gas pedal. The engine roared as I tore out of the medical clinic parking lot. I did not care about speed limits or traffic lights. I navigated the tight suburban streets with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. Tyler was not a criminal mastermind, but a desperate man cornered by his own lies is far more dangerous than any calculated villain. He knew his fraudulent custody petition would fall apart by noon. He knew the offshore bank accounts and the blind trust payments from the Sterling family would soon be dragged into open court. He had no legal options left, so he chose the only path remaining. He was going to steal the child and disappear. The elementary school sat at the end of a quiet residential street. The building was a sprawling brick structure surrounded by chain-link fences and empty playgrounds. The midday silence felt suffocating. I abandoned my car in the red fire lane directly in front of the main entrance. I did not bother turning off the engine. I sprinted up the concrete steps and slammed my hand against the security buzzer. The electronic lock clicked, and I shoved the heavy glass doors open. The main administrative office was located just down the hall. Through the wide glass windows, I could see the scene unfolding. Tyler was leaning over the reception counter. He wore his expensive tailored suit, but he had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves to sell the performance. He was playing the role of the distraught father facing an unimaginable family tragedy. He was weeping. The tears looked genuine. He held a crumpled tissue in one hand and pressed the other hand flat against the counter to steady himself. The school secretary, Mrs. Davis, stood on the other side of the desk, looking deeply sympathetic. She held a plastic clipboard with the early dismissal sign-out sheet. Leo sat on a small wooden bench near the door. He clutched his yellow backpack to his chest. His feet dangled above the linoleum floor. He looked confused and frightened by the sudden appearance of the man who had ignored him for 9 years. Tyler slid a piece of paper across the counter. It was a birth certificate. He had forged a fake document listing himself as the biological father just to bypass the strict school security protocols. He was telling Mrs. Davis that there had been a fatal car accident in the family, and he needed to take his son to the hospital immediately to say goodbye to a dying relative. He weaponized human empathy to facilitate a kidnapping. Mrs. Davis nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She clicked her pen and handed it to Tyler to sign the release form. I hit the office door with my shoulder. The wood slammed against the wall with a deafening crack that echoed through the quiet room. Mrs. Davis jumped, dropping the pen. Leo let out a small gasp and shrank back into his chair. Tyler spun around. The manufactured grief on his face vanished in a fraction of a second. It was replaced by raw, naked panic. He realized his extraction window had just slammed shut. I marched straight to the reception desk. I did not yell. I did not scream. I used the quiet, caring voice of a woman who had spent 9 years protecting a child from predators. I threw the heavy certified laboratory envelope onto the counter right on top of his forged birth certificate. "Do not let him take that boy," I said, looking directly at the secretary. I pointed at the DNA report. "He is not the father. The probability of paternity is 0%. He has 0 genetic connection to my nephew, and he is trying to kidnap him to collect a ransom. Press your panic button and call the police right now." Mrs. Davis stared at me, then looked down at the official laboratory seal. She backed away from the counter, her hand reaching under the desk for the emergency alarm. Tyler dropped the grieving father routine entirely. The polished corporate facade shattered, leaving behind a desperate, cornered animal. He let out a vicious curse and lunged toward the bench. He grabbed the strap of the yellow backpack, trying to yank Leo toward the exit. I threw myself between them. I shoved my hands hard against Tyler's chest, forcing him backward. He stumbled, hitting the edge of the reception desk. A plastic sorting tray crashed to the floor, sending colorful files scattering across the linoleum. Tyler's eyes went dark. He grabbed my forearm, his fingers digging into my skin like steel clamps. He tried to throw me out of his path to reach the boy. I planted my feet and held my ground. I shielded Leo behind my body, pushing the boy further into the corner. Tyler raised his free hand, preparing to strike me or shove me into the heavy metal filing cabinets. He was willing to use physical force to secure his $10 million ticket out of the country. Before his hand could connect, the wail of approaching sirens pierced the school walls. Flashing red and blue lights illuminated the frosted glass of the front entrance. Tyler froze. He looked at the door, then at the windows. He calculated his escape routes and realized there were none. Heavy boots pounded down the hallway. 3 armed police officers burst into the administrative office with their hands resting on their utility belts. They shouted instructions commanding everyone to freeze, but they did not arrive alone. Maya walked through the doorway right behind the officers. She did not look like a panicked wife. She looked like an executioner stepping onto the scaffold. Her designer coat brushed against the doorframe. Her posture was flawless. She surveyed the wrecked office, the scattered papers, and the man she had married. She did not shed a single tear. Her face was a mask of pure, cold calculation. Tyler opened his mouth. He raised his hands in a placating gesture, preparing to spin one final lie to the police and his wealthy wife. He tried to claim it was a misunderstanding, a family dispute over a sick child. An officer grabbed Tyler by the shoulder, spun him around, and pressed him face first against the cinder block wall. The sharp click of metal handcuffs echoed in the small room. Tyler struggled against the restraint, but the officers held him firm. Maya stepped forward. She stopped 2 feet away from the man pinned against the wall. Tyler looked at her, pleading with his eyes, begging her to use her elite legal connections to bail him out. Maya tilted her head slightly. "You forgot who you married, Tyler," she said. Her voice was devoid of any warmth. It carried the chilling authority of a corporate predator who destroyed fraudulent executives for a living. "You left your personal laptop open on the desk when you ran out of the house. You forgot to clear your browser history." Tyler's face went entirely slack. The blood drained from his cheeks, leaving him looking like a ghost. He realized she had seen everything. She had seen the offshore bank routing numbers. She had seen the expedited passport applications. And most importantly, she had seen the hidden email folders connecting him to the Sterling Family Trust Fund. The kidnapping attempt was thwarted, but the real nightmare was just shifting gears. Tyler was being dragged out of the school in handcuffs. The immediate threat to Leo was neutralized, yet the massive shadow of the billionaire extortion scheme remained. Tyler was going to jail for attempted abduction, but the truth about whose child I had been raising for 9 years was still sitting in those hidden laptop files, waiting to be dragged into the unforgiving light. The flashing lights of the police cruisers illuminated the school hallway, casting long shadows against the lockers. The officers kept Tyler pinned against the wall while they reviewed the conflicting paperwork. The reality of the justice system is rarely as satisfying as we hope. The lead officer examined my expired temporary guardianship papers and then looked at the forged birth certificate Tyler presented. Because there was no formal family court order on file and no physical harm had occurred, the police categorized the attempted abduction as a civil domestic dispute. They uncuffed my brother. They issued a stern warning and banned him from the school grounds, but they did not put him in the back of a squad car. Tyler rubbed his wrists and adjusted his jacket. He offered a smug, patronizing smirk, believing he had survived the storm. He turned to his wife, assuming her elite legal connections would shield him from the fallout. He told Maya he would meet her back at their estate to discuss the next steps. Maya did not raise her voice. She looked at the man she had married and delivered a financial execution. She informed him that his access codes to their gated community were already deactivated. She told him his name was removed from all joint marital accounts an hour ago. The platinum credit cards in his wallet were canceled. The luxury vehicle he drove was registered under her corporate entity, and a tow truck was currently impounding it from the school parking lot. Tyler smirked, faded into a look of profound horror. He was a man who sustained his arrogant lifestyle on the wealth of a successful woman and the hidden hush money of a billionaire. In less than 10 minutes, Maya severed every financial artery keeping him alive. She left him standing on the sidewalk with nothing but the clothes on his back. He had no money to hire his expensive attorney. He had no leverage to fight back. When Diane, my forensic lawyer, summoned him to her downtown office that evening, he had no choice but to show up. Rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Diane Corner office. The city lights below looked blurred and distant. I sat on one side of the long mahogany conference table with Maya to my left and Diane to my right. Tyler sat opposite us. The polished corporate facade was entirely gone. His tie was missing. His shirt collar was unbuttoned, and dark circles hung heavy under his eyes. He looked pathetic. Diane did not offer him a seat or a glass of water. She slid 3 items across the polished wood surface. The certified laboratory report showing a 0% DNA match, the bank statements detailing his offshore shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, and the corporate registry linking his secret monthly income to Sterling Holdings. Maya spoke first. She placed a drafted legal document on the table. It was not a standard divorce petition. It was an annulment filing based on egregious financial fraud. She told Tyler she was prepared to hand the offshore banking records directly to the federal tax authorities. She promised him he would face federal tax evasion charges before the end of the month, unless he detailed every single aspect of his deception right now. Tyler stared at the papers. He looked at the 3 women sitting across from him and realized he possessed 0 leverage. He was cornered. The arrogant bluster evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, desperate coward. He buried his face in his hands, and the horrifying truth finally spilled out into the quiet room. 9 years ago, Tyler was dating a woman named Jessica. She worked as an event hostess at high-end charity galas, catering to the political and corporate elite. During one of those exclusive events, she met Richard Sterling. The billionaire real estate mogul was married and fiercely protective of his public image, but he engaged in a brief, reckless affair with Jessica. She got pregnant. Shortly after the affair ended, most men would walk away from a cheating partner. Tyler saw a lucrative business opportunity. He waited until the child was born. Once he confirmed the baby carried the Sterling genetic markers, he kicked Jessica out of their shared apartment. She was young, broke, and terrified of the wealthy Sterling family destroying her life, so she disappeared without a fight. Tyler took the newborn infant and approached the billionaire. He did not ask for a one-time payout. He demanded a permanent salary. He leveraged the child's existence, threatening to expose the illegitimate heir to the media and to Richard Sterling, ruthless high society wife. The billionaire agreed to pay $5,000 every month to ensure the child remained a hidden secret. But Tyler despised children. He hated the crying, the sleepless nights, and the relentless responsibility of parenting. He wanted the hush money, but he refused to do the work. So he drove to my college dormitory. He stood in the hallway holding a crying infant and played the role of a terrified, overwhelmed young father. He weaponized my empathy. He knew I had a soft heart and a fierce, protective instinct. He handed me the baby and spun a tragic tale about a runaway mother and a ruined future. I sat at the conference table feeling a sickening wave of nausea wash over me. The memories of my early 20s flashed through my mind. The nights I spent crying in a cramped apartment because I could not afford heating. The days I spent scrubbing hospital floors to buy asthma medication. The moment I held the Johns Hopkins withdrawal letter in my trembling hands and sealed my own fate. I sacrificed my entire youth, my education, and my financial stability for a child I loved deeply. And for 9 years, the man sitting across from me watched me struggle. He watched me skip meals so Leo could eat. He watched me wear shoes with holes in the soles, all while he collected a $5,000 paycheck every single month from a billionaire shell company without lifting a finger. I asked him why he came back. Why disrupt the perfect extortion scheme after 9 years of silence? Tyler looked up, his eyes red and frantic. He explained the catalyst for the sudden custody battle. Richard Sterling suffered a fatal heart attack last month. The monthly blind trust payments stopped immediately. But the billionaire possessed a strange sense of legacy. Before he died, he updated his private estate documents. He left a $5 million trust fund explicitly designated for his unacknowledged biological son. The terms of the trust were strict. The money would be distributed directly to the legal guardian of the child to ensure proper upbringing and education. Tyler knew he needed to establish primary physical and formal legal custody of Leo before the probate court finalized the estate execution. If he could prove he was the dedicated father raising the Sterling heir, he could intercept the $5 million payout before the auditors dug too deeply into the genetic truth. He used me as free childcare for a decade. Then he tried to frame me for human trafficking just to sweep me aside and steal the inheritance meant for the boy I raised. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal hung heavy in the office. Tyler wiped his face, muttering that he only did what he had to do to survive. He tried to frame his actions as a desperate business strategy rather than the destruction of his own sister life. Diane clicked her pen against the desk, cutting off his pathetic justifications. She looked at the offshore banking data and then looked at Tyler. She pointed out a terrifying new reality that Tyler was too arrogant to see. She stated that the extortion payments stopped because Richard Sterling died. But billionaires do not handle their own finances. They employ teams of ruthless wealth managers, estate executors, and corporate lawyers to manage their legacy. Right now, those auditors were combing through decades of Sterling Holdings' financial ledgers. They were looking for anomalies. They were tracing the origin of the blind trust that funded my brother's lavish lifestyle. Diane lowered her voice. She told Tyler that Richard Sterling was dead, but his widow was very much alive. Victoria Sterling was known throughout the East Coast as a merciless operator who crushed anyone threatening her family reputation or their fortune. The room grew chillingly quiet. The real threat was no longer the cowardly man sitting across the table. Tyler was just a desperate thief who left a glowing paper trail of extortion. The executors of the Sterling estate were already following the money. The billionaire widow was going to find out that a low-level sales manager had been extorting her husband for a decade, and she was going to come looking for the child. The dread Diane planted in the conference room materialized far faster than I anticipated. 48 hours after Tyler confessed to his elaborate extortion scheme, my cell phone rang. The caller identification displayed a restricted number. I answered, and a crisp, formal voice informed me that a private car was waiting outside my clinic. I was instructed to step outside and attend a lunch meeting. The name of the host was not presented as a request. It was a summons from Victoria Sterling. Victoria was the widow of the late real estate titan. She navigated high society charity boards and political action committees with the precision of a military general. People who crossed the Sterling family often found their businesses audited, their credit lines frozen, and their social standing erased overnight. Tyler had poked a sleeping dragon to fund his luxury car leases, and now the dragon was wide awake. I did not call my lawyer to hide behind her. I picked up my canvas tote bag containing the forensic documents and walked out the glass doors of the clinic. A sleek black town car sat idling by the curb. The driver opened the rear door without a word. I slid onto the leather seat and watched the city blur past the tinted windows. The car stopped in front of an unmarked heavy oak door in the financial district. It was an ultra-exclusive private dining club. There were no signs and no menus in the windows. A host wearing a tailored suit greeted me by name and guided me down a quiet hallway lined with dark wood paneling. He opened the door to a secluded private dining room and stepped aside. Victoria Sterling sat at the head of a long, polished mahogany table. She wore a pristine charcoal suit accented by a pearl necklace that likely cost more than my entire annual salary. She did not stand when I entered. She did not offer a polite handshake or a superficial greeting. She simply gestured toward the empty chair situated directly across from her. I sat down. The silence in the room felt heavy, designed to intimidate outsiders into submission. Victoria observed me with eyes as cold as winter ice. She was assessing my inexpensive blazer and my unstyled hair. She was looking for weakness. Before the waiter could even pour the water, Victoria launched a ruthless assault. She picked up a thick leather-bound dossier from the chair beside her and tossed it onto the table. It slid across the smooth wood and halted inches from my hands. She told me her estate auditors had located the blind trust 2 days ago. She stated she knew about the regular monthly wire transfers stretching back 9 long years. She also knew about the $5 million inheritance provision her late husband secretly slipped into his final probate documents to benefit his unacknowledged biological son. Victoria kept her posture rigid. She accused me of orchestrating the entire plot. She painted a picture of a calculating young woman who acquired a billionaire illegitimate child and spent a decade bleeding the estate dry through silent threats. She assumed I was the hidden blackmailer pulling the strings from a modest apartment to avoid suspicion. She leaned forward and outlined my impending demise. She detailed her deep connections with state prosecutors and family court judges. She promised to have me indicted for federal wire fraud and interstate extortion. She promised to rip Leo from my custody before the end of the week and place him in a highly restricted boarding school overseas where I would never see him again. She spoke with a terrifying calm meant to break my spirit. I listened to her threats. I did not shake. I did not raise my voice to defend my honor. I remembered what Diane taught me about confronting power. You do not argue with a predator. You change the terrain. I reached for the crystal glass in front of me and took a slow, deliberate sip of water. I set the glass back down, ensuring the heavy base made a quiet, sharp click against the wood. I reached into my simple canvas tote bag and pulled out my own manila folder. It contained the meticulous forensic data Diane had compiled and the certified laboratory report. I slid the first document across the table. It was the genetic test result bearing the red tamper evidence seal. I instructed Victoria to read the bolded text at the bottom of the page. She frowned, her pristine composure cracking just a fraction at my lack of fear. She picked up the paper and read the 0% probability of paternity. I told her the man who claimed to be the father, the man who handed me a crying infant 9 years ago, shared zero genetic material with the child. I explained that I was an 18-year-old girl who threw away a full-ride scholarship to Johns Hopkins University to raise a boy I thought was my nephew. I told her I spent my youth working night shifts and eating discount soup to afford pediatric asthma medication. I slid the second stack of papers across the mahogany surface, the forensic banking ledgers mapping the Cayman Islands offshore accounts. I tapped my finger against the highlighted routing numbers. I told her I never received a single dime of the hush money her husband paid out. I pointed out that the monthly Sterling Holdings transfers went directly into an account controlled exclusively by Tyler Bennett. Victoria stared at the financial records. Her sharp eyes traced the columns of data, verifying the dates and the offshore shell corporations. The chilling reality of the situation began to set in. Richard Sterling was not extorted by the devoted guardian of his child. The billionaire was extorted by a lazy, opportunistic brother who dumped the actual labor of parenting onto a teenager while he sat back and collected the ransom. I looked the powerful widow straight in the eyes. I told her I was not her enemy. I stated that I had spent the last 9 years picking up the trash her husband left behind. I provided a loving home for a discarded child while she and her husband lived in luxury. I made it clear that I did not want the Sterling name or a seat at their high society tables. But I know exactly who has been leeching off your family fortune, I said, my voice steady and unyielding. The heavy silence returned to the dining room, but the texture of it had changed. Victoria was no longer looking at me as a target. She was looking at me as an equal who had survived a different kind of war. The wrath in her eyes shifted direction. It moved away from the woman sitting across the table and locked onto the man who had defrauded her late husband. Victoria Sterling was a woman who despised betrayal. Discovering that a low-level sales manager had successfully manipulated the Sterling empire for a decade was an insult she would never forgive. She closed the leather-bound dossier and folded her hands, resting them on top of the offshore bank statements. She asked me where Tyler was currently hiding. I felt a sharp surge of anticipation. The dynamic in the room flipped entirely. Tyler thought he could crush me by utilizing Maya wealth and dodging the family court system. He had no idea I had just handed his financial execution over to a billionaire widow who destroyed lives for sport. I told Victoria that Tyler was currently locked out of his suburban estate and stripped of his credit cards thanks to his furious wife. I explained that his wife Maya was a senior corporate consultant who was equally eager to see him pay for his deception. Victoria tilted her head, a slow, dangerous smile forming on her lips. She noted that a man without resources was a man who could be easily cornered. She picked up her water glass, taking a measured sip. She suggested it was time to arrange a formal meeting with the man who had caused us both so much trouble. I realized in that moment that Tyler had united three very different women against him. A mother who sacrificed everything to protect a child, a brilliant corporate wife who refused to be used as a shield, and a ruthless billionaire widow seeking vengeance for a tarnished legacy. Tyler was about to walk into an ambush he could never escape, and he had no idea the trap was already set. Victoria requested Maya presence immediately. I made the introduction over a secure phone line. Within 40 minutes, Maya walked through the heavy oak doors of the private dining club. She took the empty chair next to me. The visual contrast between the three of us painted a vivid picture of the collateral damage my brother left behind. I wore my practical clinic slacks and a simple blouse. Maya wore a razor-sharp corporate blazer, carrying the exhaustion of a shattered 5-year marriage. Victoria sat draped in pristine inherited tailoring, holding the power of a real estate empire. We were three women from three entirely different worlds, sitting around a polished mahogany table. We shared no history and no common ground except a single unifying objective. We were going to dismantle Tyler Bennett. Maya did not waste time with polite introductions. She opened her leather portfolio and laid out the financial ledgers she had pulled from their joint accounts. Victoria countered by sliding the blind trust payment records across the table. They compared the dates. They matched the offshore routing numbers. The two women operated with ruthless efficiency. Maya possessed the mind of a corporate auditor tracking corporate fraud, while Victoria operated with the cold precision of a billionaire protecting a legacy. I sat back and watched them work. Tyler had spent his entire life assuming women were stepping stones or safety nets. He used my youth and empathy to secure free labor. He used Maya elite status and wealth to fund his luxury lifestyle. He used Victoria dead husband's secret to extort a steady paycheck. He viewed us as resources to be extracted. He never considered what would happen if the resources started talking to each other. Victoria leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. She noted that a man facing criminal extortion charges and severe tax evasion penalties would normally hire a ruthless defense attorney and hide behind endless legal motions. Tyler still had enough dangerous charm to spin a narrative to a sympathetic judge or drag the litigation out for years. Victoria refused to allow the Sterling family name to be dragged through a prolonged public spectacle. She wanted a clean execution. She wanted Tyler stripped of his arrogance, his leverage, and his freedom in one swift motion. Maya agreed. She stated that Tyler needed to be lured into a setting where he felt invincible. A narcissist lowers his defenses only when he believes he has won the game. Maya pulled her cell phone from her purse and placed it in the center of the table. She looked at Victoria and then at me. She promised to deliver him to us on a silver platter. Maya tapped the screen and dialed his number. She switched the device to speakerphone. The line rang 3 times. Tyler answered. His voice carried a defensive edge, masking the panic of a man who had spent the last 2 days locked out of his own house and cut off from his credit cards. He asked what she wanted. He tried to sound annoyed, but the desperation bled through the receiver. Maya closed her eyes, took a steadying breath, and executed a masterclass in psychological manipulation. The sharp corporate executive vanished. In her place, a vulnerable, conflicted wife spoke into the microphone. "Tyler," she whispered, letting a deliberate tremor enter her voice. "I have been thinking about everything. I have been looking at the documents and the trust fund details. I was just so hurt. I felt betrayed." Tyler seized the opening instantly. The defensive posture evaporated. He recognized the tone of a woman seeking a reason to forgive him. He stepped right into the trap. "I know, baby," he said, his voice softening into a practiced, soothing rhythm. "I know it looked bad, but you have to understand why I kept it a secret. I did it for us. That $10 million trust fund was going to secure our future forever. I was trying to protect you from the legal mess until the money was secure." I locked eyes with Maya across the table. Her jaw tightened, but she kept her tone soft and yielding. "I know," Maya replied. "I see that now. I was just shocked by what Chloe showed me." Tyler let out a harsh, dismissive scoff. He felt his power returning. He grew bolder, feeding on his own lies. "Do not listen to Chloe," he warned. "She is bitter. She has always been jealous of what we have. She is trying to ruin our marriage because she has nothing of her own. She wants the trust fund money for herself. We cannot let her win." I sat motionless, listening to my brother rewrite history to salvage his meal ticket. He was willing to paint the sister who raised his stolen child as a greedy villain just to smooth over his wife's bruised ego. Maya swallowed hard, suppressing the fury radiating from her posture. "You are right," she murmured. "We need to be a united front. We need to talk about our legal strategy and figure out how to handle the probate court before Chloe tries another stunt." Tyler exhaled a loud breath of relief. He praised her logic. He told her he always knew she was the smartest woman in the room. He asked where they should meet to discuss the plan. Maya suggested the Oak Ridge Country Club. It was an ultra-exclusive members-only establishment nestled in the hills outside the city. It required a strict dress code and an annual membership fee that equaled a modest house. Tyler loved the Oak Ridge Country Club. It was the ultimate symbol of the wealth and status he craved. Meeting there signaled a return to the elite lifestyle he thought he had lost. Maya told him she would reserve the private dining room at 8 o'clock that evening. She instructed him to wear his best suit and prepare to celebrate their renewed partnership. Tyler agreed eagerly. He told her he loved her and promised to make everything right. Maya ended the call. The click of the disconnected line echoed in the quiet room. Maya picked up her phone and dropped it back into her purse. She looked at Victoria. "The trap is set," she stated flatly. The preparation for the evening moved with lethal synchronization. Maya contacted her divorce attorneys and finalized the annulment papers citing egregious financial fraud and deceit. Victoria mobilized her private security detail and contacted a federal prosecutor she kept on speed dial. I gathered the certified DNA results, the forged birth certificate, and the grocery receipts from 9 years ago. We were not going to a dinner party. We were attending a sentencing. Hours later, the sun dipped below the city skyline, casting long shadows over the manicured lawns of the Oak Ridge Country Club. The venue was a fortress of privilege. Valets parked imported luxury cars near the grand entrance. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the grand foyer, casting a warm golden glow over the wealthy patrons mingling near the bar. Tyler arrived exactly at 8 o'clock. He must have borrowed a suit from a friend or retrieved a spare from a gym locker, since Maya had barred him from their estate. He stepped out of a rideshare vehicle and adjusted his cuffs. He smoothed his lapels and checked his reflection in the glass doors. He walked into the lobby with his shoulders squared and his chin held high. He nodded to the familiar staff members, playing the part of a successful executive arriving for a romantic evening. He believed he had weathered the storm. He believed his silver tongue had repaired the damage. He thought he outsmarted the police, the family court, and his brilliant wife. He strode across the plush carpet feeling invincible. The maitre d' greeted him with a polite bow and informed him that his wife was waiting in the private dining suite down the hall. Tyler offered a confident smile and handed the man a generous cash tip. He walked down the quiet corridor away from the noise of the main dining room. He approached the heavy mahogany double doors of the private suite. He paused for a fraction of a second, fixing a charming, apologetic smile on his face, ready to play the role of the devoted husband seeking redemption. He pushed the brass handles and the doors swung open inward, revealing the scene waiting inside. Tyler stepped over the threshold, expecting candlelight and a vulnerable wife holding a glass of wine. He expected a quiet negotiation and a swift return to his luxury life. He expected to win. The doors closed silently behind him, trapping him inside the room with the devastating reality he could no longer escape. Tyler pushed the heavy mahogany doors open, expecting dim lighting and a vulnerable wife. He anticipated a quiet room where he could spin his practiced lies and secure his affluent future. Instead, the private suite was flooded with harsh overhead light. He stepped onto the thick Persian rug, and the doors clicked shut behind him. His practiced smile froze. He stopped walking. Maya sat at the center of a long, polished dining table. She did not wear the soft evening dress he expected. She wore a tailored black corporate suit. Her posture was rigid and unforgiving. To her right sat Victoria Sterling, draped in pristine inherited tailoring. To her left, I sat with my hands folded, resting on the wood surface. 3 women waiting in total silence. Tyler looked at Maya. He swallowed hard. His eyes darted to me. He let out a nervous, hollow laugh. He asked Maya what kind of joke this was and why his sister was sitting in their private dining room. He did not recognize Victoria. To a mid-level sales manager, billionaires are just names in news articles. He had never seen the face of the woman whose family he had been extorting for 9 years. Maya did not answer him. She did not even blink. She just stared at him with the cold detachment of a predator observing trapped prey. Victoria spoke first. She did not raise her voice. She used the quiet, carrying tone of a woman who commanded boardrooms and destroyed corporate rivals over breakfast. She told Tyler he was standing in the presence of Victoria Sterling. I watched the color drain from my brother's face. His jaw went slack. The confident posture collapsed instantly. He took a stumbling step backward until his shoulders hit the heavy wooden doors. He reached behind him trying to find the brass handle, but the doors were locked from the outside. 2 men wearing dark suits stood like statues in the dim corners of the room. Victoria brought her private security. Tyler was trapped. Victoria picked up a thick manila folder from the table. She flicked her wrist and sent it sliding across the polished mahogany. It stopped right at the edge of the table, inches from Tyler's waist. She instructed him to open it. Tyler's hands shook as he picked up the folder. He opened the cover. The document inside bore the official seal of the United States Department of Justice. Victoria narrated the contents while his terrified eyes scanned the text. She explained it was a draft of a federal indictment. The charges included interstate extortion, wire fraud, and conspiracy to defraud a legal estate. She told him her lawyers had spent the entire afternoon sitting with a federal prosecutor. They mapped out every offshore transfer, every fake child support receipt, and every anonymous email he sent to her late husband over the past decade. They traced the Cayman Islands accounts back to his personal laptop. They handed the federal authorities a complete roadmap of his criminal enterprise. The paper trembled in Tyler's grip. He tried to speak. He tried to claim it was a vast misunderstanding. He stammered that he was just a desperate father trying to care for his son. He looked around the room, searching for a shred of sympathy. Victoria cut him off. She stated that her husband was a flawed man who made a terrible mistake, but Tyler was a parasite who commodified a human child for profit. She promised him he would face a minimum of 20 years in a federal penitentiary. She assured him she would spend whatever financial resources were necessary to ensure he never saw the outside of a prison cell again. Tyler dropped the folder. It fluttered to the floor, landing near his expensive leather shoes. He turned his desperate, pleading eyes to his wife. He begged Maya to listen to him. He pleaded with her to call her elite corporate lawyers to fix the situation. He reminded her they were a team and that he loved her. Maya stood up. She picked up her own sleek leather portfolio. She extracted a stack of crisp white legal papers and dropped them onto the table. They landed with a heavy thud that echoed in the quiet room. She informed him those were annulment filings based on severe financial fraud and marital deception. She stated she was not just divorcing him. She was erasing their entire 5-year marriage from the legal record. She explained that the filings included a devastating civil lawsuit for emotional distress and reputation damage. She told him she had already frozen his assets. She locked him out of their suburban properties and contacted his regional employer to report his fraudulent activities. How was unemployed, homeless, and buried under millions of dollars in civil liability before the federal prosecutors even filed their criminal charges. Maya looked at the man she once loved. Her expression held zero pity. She told him he was a con artist who used her wealth to fund a kidnapping and extortion scheme. She promised him he would leave this country club with nothing but the suit on his back and the impending threat of federal prison. Tyler's breathing turned shallow and rapid. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The walls of his carefully constructed life were crashing down around him in real time. He looked at Victoria. He looked at Maya. They offered him nothing but cold disdain. Then his eyes found me. I had not spoken a single word since he entered the room. I sat in my chair watching his empire crumble. 9 years ago, I stood in a cramped dormitory hallway holding a crying newborn. I remembered the terror in my chest. I remembered the cold finality in his voice when he told me my life was over and his was just beginning. I remembered the Johns Hopkins acceptance letter gathering dust in a drawer. I remembered the nights I skipped meals so his biological shield could eat fresh food. Now the roles were reversed. He was the one drowning, and I held the anchor. Tyler stared at me. The panic in his eyes morphed into pure, unbridled rage. He could not attack the billionaire widow surrounded by armed guards. He could not attack the wealthy wife who held his financial destruction in her hands. His narcissistic brain sought the easiest target, the sister he had manipulated and abused his entire life, the woman he believed was born to carry his burdens. He screamed my name. His voice cracked, echoing off the high ceilings. He blamed me for everything. He yelled that I ruined his life. He claimed I set him up because I was jealous of his success. He shouted that if I had just kept my mouth shut and stayed in my place, he would have secured the $10 million and taken care of everyone. He twisted reality, trying to make himself the victim of my supposed betrayal. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. I looked at his sweat-soaked face and his trembling hands. I spoke for the first time that evening. I told him his success was a mirage funded by a dead man and a deceived woman. I told him he was nothing but a coward, hiding behind a child. The words snapped the last thread of his sanity. The illusion of the sophisticated executive shattered, leaving a rabid, desperate animal. Tyler let out a guttural roar. He lunged forward. He cleared the space between the door and the table in 2 long strides. He reached his hands across the mahogany surface, aiming directly for my throat. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to punish me for exposing his hollow existence. I did not flinch. I did not move out of my chair. Before his fingers could even brush the fabric of my shirt, a blur of motion intercepted him. The 2 security guards posted in the corners of the room collapsed on him with brutal efficiency. One guard grabbed Tyler's outstretched arm, twisting it sharply behind his back. The second guard hit Tyler behind the knees. Tyler crashed hard onto the floor. The impact knocked the wind out of his lungs. His chin struck the thick Persian rug. The guards pinned him face down. A heavy boot rested between his shoulder blades, pressing him firmly into the floorboards. Tyler thrashed and kicked, but the men held him immobile. The commotion inside the private suite drew immediate attention. The heavy mahogany doors swung open. The noise of the upscale country club spilled into the room. A crowd of elite patrons, wealthy executives, and prominent socialites gathered in the hallway. They held crystal champagne flutes and wore expensive evening gowns. They stared in stunned silence at the scene unfolding inside the private dining room. They saw Tyler Bennett, the man who spent years parading around their exclusive club, acting like a titan of industry pinned to the floor like a common street criminal. They saw his tailored suit wrinkled and stained with sweat. They heard his pathetic gasps for air. Victoria Sterling stood up from her chair. She adjusted her pearl necklace and looked down at the man writhing on the carpet. She spoke loudly enough for the gathered crowd in the hallway to hear. She instructed her security team to hold him until the federal authorities arrived. She announced to the hallway that the man on the floor was a thief who had been extorting her family. The whispers spread through the hallway instantly. The social execution was flawless. In elite circles, reputation is currency. Victoria had just bankrupted Tyler's social standing in front of the most powerful people in the city. The country club members turned their backs in disgust, pulling out their phones to text their networks. Tyler was erased from their world in mere seconds. Maya picked up her designer handbag. She stepped over Tyler's legs without looking down. She walked out of the room, her head held high, leaving her fraudulent marriage on the floor. I stood up from my chair. I looked down at my brother. He was staring at the ceiling, panting, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had nothing left. No money, no wife, no child, no freedom. The empire he tried to steal had crushed him instead. I walked toward the open doors. I did not say goodbye. I stepped out into the bright lights of the hallway, leaving the darkness behind me. The fallout from the country club did not unfold over weeks. It detonated in under 48 hours. Tyler spent the night in a concrete holding cell, wearing the same tailored suit he wore to his social execution. While he sat on a metal bench staring at the cinder block wall, the federal government mobilized. The prosecutors, Victoria Sterling, kept on speed dial, did not waste time. They secured warrants before the sun came up. At 9 in the morning, agents wearing dark windbreakers walked through the glass doors of the regional supply firm where Tyler worked as a sales manager. They did not stop at the reception desk. They marched straight to his corner office. Co-workers peered over their cubicle partitions, watching in stunned silence as investigators unplugged computer monitors and boxed up hard drives. The company human resources director stood in the hallway holding a termination letter that was drafted the second the badges flashed. The agents seized servers containing years of encrypted emails and offshore bank routing numbers. They gathered the exact digital footprint Tyler thought he had scrubbed. He left a trail of breadcrumbs leading directly to the Cayman Islands, and the federal government was sweeping up every single piece. By noon, the news of the raid leaked to the local press. Tyler was a nobody, but his marriage to a high-profile corporate consultant made the situation newsworthy. Maya knew the media would start digging. She knew her elite client list would demand answers regarding her association with a federal suspect. She did not wait for the journalists to control the narrative. She took the weapon out of their hands and wielded it herself. Maya sat in her sleek downtown office and authorized her public relations team to release a formal statement across all major media platforms. It was a masterclass in corporate distancing. She did not sound bitter or broken. She sounded like a leader making a clinical decision. The press release announced her immediate filing for an annulment based on egregious financial deception. It stated she was severing all personal and professional ties with Tyler Bennett. She framed herself not as a naive victim, but as a decisive executive rooting out corruption in her own home. The final paragraph of the statement was the true fatal blow. Maya announced a personal donation of $200,000 to a national foundation supporting low-income single mothers. She stated the funds were meant to empower women who sacrifice their own futures to raise children in the face of abandonment. It was a clear, unspoken tribute to me. It was a public acknowledgement of the decade I spent scrubbing hospital floors while her husband siphoned her wealth. The internet reacted with terrifying speed. The press release went viral within an hour. Professional networking sites and social media feeds lit up with commentary. Maya was praised as a fierce, resilient woman. Tyler became the universal villain of the day. Tyler experienced this digital slaughter firsthand. He managed to secure a temporary release from custody using a cheap bail bondsman and a fraction of the loose cash he kept hidden in a gym bag. He could not return to his sprawling suburban estate. The gates were locked and his access codes were revoked. He could not access his bank accounts. The federal authorities froze every single asset bearing his name. He checked into a dingy roadside motel on the outskirts of the city. The room smelled of stale smoke and mildew. The luxury lifestyle he enjoyed for 5 years evaporated, leaving him sitting on a sagging mattress staring at his cell phone. His narcissistic brain refused to accept defeat. He believed his own lies so deeply he thought he could still persuade the public to take his side. He opened his social media profiles. His follower count was inflated by his proximity to Maya. He typed out a frantic, chaotic post. He claimed he was the victim of a vindictive wife and a jealous sister. He spun a narrative about a loving father trying to rescue his son from a toxic environment. He hit send, hoping the internet would rally behind a misunderstood man. The backlash was instantaneous and devastating. Nobody offered sympathy. The comments flooded his screen like a tidal wave of public scorn. Investigative bloggers linked the federal raid to his name. Strangers dissected his fake fatherhood claims, pointing out the timing of his custody battle, coinciding with a rumored billionaire trust fund. Women tore apart his victim complex, tagging the FBI and mocking his sudden fall from grace. Tyler watched the notifications roll in. Every comment was a fresh humiliation. The digital world stripped away his polished facade and exposed the cowardly thief underneath. He tried to delete the negative responses, but they multiplied too fast. He panicked and deactivated his entire account. The screen went dark. The silence in the motel room pressed against his ears. He had one last lifeline. He scrolled through his contacts and dialed the number of his expensive family attorney. He needed a defense strategy. He needed a way to fight the federal charges and the impending custody battle. He listened to the line ring, hoping the lawyer would answer with a loophole or a technicality. The attorney picked up on the fourth ring. Tyler launched into a frantic monologue demanding immediate legal intervention and complaining about the frozen bank accounts. The lawyer cut him off mid-sentence. The tone was devoid of the deferential respect Tyler was accustomed to hearing. The attorney informed Tyler that their professional relationship was officially terminated. Tyler gasped, gripping the phone tight. He demanded an explanation. He yelled that he had signed a retainer agreement. The lawyer explained the reality of the situation with chilling clarity. The retainer check bounced that morning because Maya severed the joint marital funds, But the lack of payment was only a secondary issue. The primary reason for the withdrawal was survival. The attorney stated he operated a respectable family law practice. He did not represent clients indicted for federal wire fraud and interstate extortion. Furthermore, the attorney revealed he had received a polite but unmistakable phone call from the legal team representing Victoria Sterling. The Sterling family possessed enough political and financial leverage to ruin any law firm that stood in their way. Victoria made it clear that anyone defending the man who extorted her late husband would be considered an enemy of her estate. The attorney told Tyler that no reputable lawyer in the state would touch his case. He advised Tyler to request a public defender and surrender to the federal marshals. The line clicked dead. Tyler stared at the black screen of his phone. He was sitting alone in a cheap motel room with peeling wallpaper. He had no wife to fund his ego. He had no billionaire to extort. He had no lawyer to protect him from the justice system. The social circle he coveted had discarded him. The internet despised him. The federal government was preparing to bury him under a mountain of evidence. He lost the empire he tried to steal, and he lost the luxury life he already possessed. Every tool of manipulation he ever wielded was systematically broken. He was isolated. But the legal bloodbath was not over. The criminal charges were pending, but the family court system still demanded a resolution. The final hearing to determine the permanent custody of the child he viewed as a lottery ticket was scheduled for the next morning. Tyler had to face a judge without legal counsel, without money, and without a single lie left to tell. The heavy oak doors of Courtroom 4 swung open at exactly 9 in the morning. I sat at the plaintiff table flanking the center aisle. My legal team flanked me. Diane sat on my right, organizing her thick forensic financial binders with ruthless precision. David, my original affordable family lawyer, sat on my left, arranging the standard custody filings. We formed a wall of preparation. 10 minutes past the hour, Tyler walked into the courtroom. He did not look like the polished executive who stormed into my medical clinic earlier that week. He looked like a man who had slept in a damp motel room. His expensive suit was heavily wrinkled. He wore no tie. His shirt collar hung open, revealing a flushed neck. Dark bags circled his bloodshot eyes. He carried a single flimsy manila folder. He walked to the respondent table and sat down alone. He had no elite corporate attorney shielding him. He had no wealthy wife sitting in the gallery offering moral support. The federal raid, the public relations slaughter, and the canceled bank accounts stripped him of his armor. He was forced to represent himself pro se in a high-stakes family court battle. Judge Harrison entered the room from chambers. He was a veteran magistrate who had spent 2 decades presiding over bitter divorces and contested adoptions. He possessed zero tolerance for courtroom theatrics. He took his seat at the elevated bench, adjusted his reading glasses, and looked down at the 2 tables. The judge noted the absence of the high-priced attorney who previously represented my brother. He asked Tyler if he intended to proceed without legal counsel. Tyler stood up. His hands gripped the edge of the wooden table. He tried to summon his old arrogant charm. He offered the judge a practiced, weary smile. He claimed his lawyer faced an unexpected scheduling conflict. He launched into a rehearsed monologue. He played the role of a desperate, misunderstood brother. He spun a narrative about a sister who hacked his bank accounts and manipulated his wife into leaving him just so she could steal his beloved son. He pleaded with the court to recognize his biological rights and restore his family. Judge Harrison did not offer a sympathetic nod. He raised a single hand, cutting off the pathetic performance mid-sentence. The judge stated that the court operates on verified evidence rather than emotional speeches. He reached for a sealed envelope resting on top of his docket pile. The judge informed the room that he had received the expedited results of the mandatory genetic test directly from the state-certified laboratory. He broke the seal. He pulled out the official report and scanned the summary paragraph. The courtroom grew quiet enough to hear the ticking of the wall clock. Judge Harrison looked over the rim of his glasses directly at my brother. He read the conclusion aloud for the court record. The probability of paternity is 0%. Tyler gripped the table harder. The wood groaned under the pressure of his hands. He knew the results were coming, but hearing a federal magistrate read the genetic truth into the public record shattered his last remaining defense. He scrambled to pivot his strategy. He argued that biology did not dictate fatherhood. He claimed he raised the boy in his heart. He stated he possessed a psychological bond with the child and intended to fulfill his paternal duties moving forward. Diane stood up. She did not raise her voice. She used the cold, clinical tone of a surgeon operating on a tumor. She addressed the bench and submitted her first piece of evidence. She informed the judge that Tyler Bennett possessed zero psychological bond with the minor child. She stated the respondent had not seen the child sent a birthday card or attended a medical appointment in 9 years. Tyler interrupted, shouting that he provided vital financial support during that entire decade. He pointed a shaking finger at me, claiming he funded my life. Diane slid a thick stack of audited banking ledgers across the courtroom clerk desk. She instructed the judge to review the offshore accounts. She methodically dismantled Tyler's lies. She traced the monthly $5,000 transfers from his joint marital accounts directly to the Cayman Islands Shell Corporation. She provided the sworn affidavit from Maya corporate accounting team confirming the fraud. She did not stop there. Diane submitted the second binder. She presented the blind trust payments originating from Sterling Holdings. She exposed the extortion scheme in open court. She painted a vivid, horrifying picture for the magistrate. Tyler did not abandon a child out of fear or youth. He brokered a human life for a steady paycheck. He dumped the grueling daily labor of parenting onto an 18-year-old girl while he collected a $6,000 monthly ransom from a billionaire. He only filed the current custody petition because the billionaire died, leaving a massive trust fund that required physical possession of the boy to unlock. Judge Harrison flipped through the highlighted financial ledgers. His expression hardened into a mask of judicial fury. Family court magistrates despise parents who neglect their children. They harbor a special unyielding wrath for individuals who use children as financial hostages. David stood up next. He submitted the final piece of the puzzle. He handed the clerk a box overflowing with faded receipts and medical bills. He presented the evidence of my last 9 years, the discount formula, the eviction notices, the pediatric asthma treatments paid in cash. He submitted the official letter from Johns Hopkins University proving I surrendered a full academic scholarship to keep the boy out of the foster care system. David spoke with quiet conviction. He told the judge that while the respondent hoarded extortion money in offshore accounts, the petitioner scrubbed hospital floors on the night shift to afford winter coats for a child that did not belong to her. Tyler panicked. He saw the judge's eyes darken. He slammed his fist onto his table. He yelled that the money was his. He argued the trust fund belonged to him because he orchestrated the deal with the billionaire. He demanded the court grant him temporary custody so he could secure his rightful payout before his life fell apart. Judge Harrison struck his gavel with a force that echoed like a gunshot. He ordered Tyler to remain silent or face immediate incarceration for contempt of court. The magistrate leaned forward, resting his forearms on the elevated bench. He delivered his ruling with lethal precision. He stated he had presided over family court for 20 years and had rarely witnessed a case of such profound moral bankruptcy. The judge formally dismissed Tyler's custody petition with prejudice, meaning it could never be filed again. He issued a permanent restraining order stripping Tyler of any presumptive or psychological parental rights. He officially granted my petition for full legal adoption, cementing my status as Leo permanent mother in the eyes of the law. Tyler slumped back into his chair. The defeat washed over his face. He lost the child. He lost the $10 million trust fund. He was going to federal prison with nothing. But Judge Harrison was not finished. The magistrate looked at the financial ledgers Diane had submitted. He noted the $6,000 monthly payments Tyler received from the Sterling estate for the express purpose of the child upkeep. The judge invoked the legal doctrine of equitable restitution. He stated that Tyler collected funds designated for the boy's survival while forcing a third party to bear the actual financial burden of raising him. Judge Harrison calculated the stolen funds over a period of 9 years. He did not issue a polite suggestion. He issued a punitive judicial mandate. He ordered Tyler to repay retroactive child support and equitable reimbursement directly to me. Tyler jumped out of his chair. He stammered that his assets were frozen. He argued the federal government raided his office and locked his bank accounts pending the extortion investigation. He claimed he was penniless. Judge Harrison offered a cold, unforgiving smile. The magistrate explained that family court support orders hold a unique priority status in the legal system. They pierce corporate veils and bypass standard creditor lines. The judge signed an emergency writ of garnishment right there on the bench. He authorized the immediate seizure of whatever liquid assets remained in Tyler untainted personal accounts before the federal authorities officially confiscated the rest. The judge handed the signed order to the clerk. He looked at Tyler one final time. He suggested the respondent use his remaining hours of freedom to find a very good criminal defense attorney. The gavel struck the sounding block a second time, terminating the hearing. A pair of courtroom bailiffs stepped forward, instructing Tyler to gather his single folder and exit the premises. Tyler did not look at me. He did not utter a final threat. His shoulders curved inward. He dragged his feet across the carpet, looking like a hollowed-out shell of a man. The legal slaughter was comprehensive and total. He was erased from our lives. I sat at the plaintiff table, exhaling a breath I felt like I had been holding for 9 years. Diane closed her thick binders. David offered a warm, congratulatory smile. We won the war. Leo was safe. He belonged to me permanently. I gathered my purse and walked out the heavy oak doors of the courtroom, feeling lighter than I had in a decade. I stepped into the wide marble corridor of the courthouse, expecting to walk to my car and drive home to celebrate with my son. I stopped halfway down the hall. The custody battle was over, but the financial storm surrounding the child was not. Standing near the sleek metal elevator banks, waiting with pristine posture and an unreadable expression, was Victoria Sterling. She wore a tailored charcoal suit and held a slim leather portfolio. The billionaire widow had tracked my hearing schedule. Tyler was eliminated from the board, but the $5 million trust fund her late husband secretly created for his unacknowledged biological heir still existed. The money loomed large, and Victoria was not a woman who left loose ends untied. The marble corridor of the courthouse was quiet, save for the distant hum of the elevators. Victoria Sterling stood perfectly still, holding a slim leather portfolio. The power dynamic in the hallway shifted instantly upon her presence. She was a woman accustomed to controlling the wealth and reputation of a dynasty. She did not operate on emotion or sentiment. She operated on structure and legacy. I approached her, maintaining a steady pace. I did not avert my gaze. I had just defeated a predator in a court of law and secured permanent custody of my son. I was not going to cower before a billionaire widow. Victoria noted my approach and offered a brief acknowledging nod. She did not waste time with polite congratulations regarding the custody ruling. She moved directly to the business at hand. She informed me that her private legal team had secured a secure conference room down the hall. She instructed me to join her to finalize the remaining administrative details regarding my son. I followed her into a small, windowless room reserved for private legal negotiations. The space contained a heavy wooden table and several leather chairs. Victoria sat at the head of the table. She unclasped her portfolio and withdrew a stack of dense legal documents. She folded her hands and looked directly at me. The icy detachment she displayed during our initial meeting at the private dining club was gone. It was replaced by a pragmatic, respectful clarity. She stated that her late husband was a deeply flawed man who made reckless decisions. She acknowledged the reality of his infidelity and the existence of his unacknowledged biological heir. She did not express a desire to welcome Leo into the Sterling family compound. She did not offer him a place at their Thanksgiving table or invite him to share their aristocratic lifestyle. That is not how the American upper class handles indiscretions. They do not invite chaos into their inner circles. They build structural walls to manage the fallout. Victoria tapped the thick stack of papers. She explained the terms of the secret probate provision her husband established before his fatal heart attack. The late Titan set aside $5 million intended for the boy. However, the original wording of the trust was vague and vulnerable to exploitation, which allowed Tyler to orchestrate his extortion attempt in the first place. Victoria leaned forward. She told me she possessed the legal authority and the political leverage to contest that provision in probate court. She could have tied the funds up in endless litigation, drained the trust through exorbitant legal fees, and ensured the boy never saw a single dime. She possessed the power to erase his inheritance entirely just to protect the Sterling name from the scandal of an illegitimate child. I sat back in my chair, matching her steady gaze. I asked her why she did not choose that path. Victoria offered a thin, humorless smile. She stated that punishing an innocent child for the sins of his father and the greed of an extortionist was poor business. More importantly, she recognized the immense labor I had undertaken. She acknowledged the 9 years I spent sacrificing my youth, my education, and my financial stability to protect the Sterling bloodline from the foster care system, while her own husband ignored his responsibilities. She slid a silver pen across the table, placing it next to the documents. She explained her solution. It was a masterpiece of elite legal engineering designed to protect the wealth while acknowledging the biological reality. She informed me she had ordered her top estate attorneys to restructure the $5 million inheritance into an ironclad generation skipping blind trust. She did not cancel the payout. She locked it inside a financial fortress. Victoria outlined the strict parameters. The trust fund was officially registered under Leo legal name. The funds were placed under the management of an independent fiduciary board operating outside the control of the Sterling family. The board possessed strict instructions regarding the disbursement of the capital. The money was entirely inaccessible until Leo reached his 25th birthday. Victoria locked the vault. She ensured that no one could tap into the principal amount. I could not access the funds to pay off my mortgage or upgrade my lifestyle. The Sterling estate could not reclaim the money if they changed their mind. The capital was sealed, generating interest and growing silently for the next 16 years. There was one single exception built into the rigid framework. The fiduciary board was authorized to disburse funds solely for educational purposes. If Leo gained acceptance to a Tier 1 university, the trust would cover the tuition room board and academic expenses directly. The money would flow from the bank straight to the university bursar, bypassing any potential family interference. Victoria looked at me, ensuring I understood the gravity of the arrangement. She was securing the boy future without inviting him into her present. She provided him with a massive financial safety net, but she ensured he would grow up in the grounded, stable reality I had built for him, rather than the toxic, insulated world of extreme wealth. I picked up the silver pen. I reviewed the documents, checking the clauses and the fiduciary appointments. It was a clean, unassailable contract. It guaranteed Leo would never have to worry about student loans or a down payment on his first home. It ensured the struggles I faced raising him on night shift wages would end with my generation. I signed my name on the designated lines, executing the agreement as Leo legal guardian. I slid the papers back across the table. Victoria gathered the documents and returned them to her leather portfolio. She stood up, smoothing the front of her charcoal suit. The transaction was complete. The extortion plot was dismantled. The predator was facing federal prison, and the inheritance was secured. She walked toward the door but paused before turning the brass handle. She looked back at me. The harsh corporate exterior softened just a fraction, revealing the sharp, perceptive woman underneath. She extended her hand. I stood up and met her grasp. Her handshake was firm and resolute. It was not a gesture of friendship. It was a mutual recognition of survival between two women who had navigated a profound betrayal. Victoria looked me in the eye. She told me I had raised a remarkable child under impossible circumstances. She stated the Sterling bloodline owed me a debt of gratitude. She promised I would never hear from her or her estate lawyers again. She turned and walked out of the conference room, disappearing down the marble hallway. She erased herself from our lives, leaving behind a $5 million ghost and a clean slate. I stood alone in the quiet room. The adrenaline that fueled me through the custody battle and the corporate negotiations slowly began to ebb. I exhaled a long breath. The war was officially over. I possessed the legal adoption papers in my purse and the knowledge that my son's future was financially invincible. I walked out of the courthouse and stepped into the bright afternoon sunlight. I did not feel the need to celebrate with champagne or grand gestures. I felt a profound, quiet peace settling over my shoulders. I navigated the bustling city sidewalks, heading toward my modest sedan, parked a few blocks away. I drove back to my apartment building. I climbed the stairs to the second floor and unlocked my front door. The apartment was small and cluttered with school projects and mismatched furniture. It did not resemble a billionaire estate or an elite country club. It looked like a home built on resilience and fierce, unconditional love. The chaos of the past week was finally behind me. I had secured my family and vanquished the man who tried to destroy it. But the quiet apartment also served as a stark reminder of the sacrifices I made to reach this moment. I looked at the small desk in the corner, where I spent countless nights studying for my healthcare administration degree while Leo slept in the next room. The battles were won, but the ghosts of the past still lingered. I had secured my son's future, but I had yet to reclaim the future I abandoned for him 9 years ago. 6 months is a short period on a calendar, but it functions as a lifetime when you are measuring the distance between surviving and living. The turning of the seasons brought a sharp, crisp chill to the city air. It also brought the final notifications from the federal prosecutor office. I stood in my kitchen on a quiet Saturday morning, holding a standard legal envelope from the Department of Justice Victim Witness Assistance Program. I did not read the documents with a racing heart or trembling hands. I read them while sipping a cup of black coffee, feeling nothing but cold clinical closure. Tyler did not secure a lenient plea deal. The federal judge presiding over his case possessed zero sympathy for a man who extorted an estate and attempted to frame a family member for human trafficking. Tyler faced the reality of the federal sentencing guidelines. The judge handed down a sentence of 180 months in a medium-security penitentiary, 15 years. The state seized his remaining hidden assets to cover the IRS penalties and the retroactive child support he owed me. He traded his custom-tailored suits for a standard-issue uniform. The letters he attempted to mail me from the holding facility earlier that month went straight into a paper shredder unopened. He was erased from the board. I set the federal notice on the kitchen counter and looked out the window. The autumn leaves scattered across the pavement. The anxiety that used to dictate my every waking moment, the phantom weight pressing against my chest, was gone. When you spend 9 years mapping out escape routes, every time your phone rings you forget how normal oxygen feels. I no longer jolted awake at 3 a.m, bracing for an eviction notice or a medical emergency. The $5 million trust fund sat locked inside an impenetrable financial vault, ensuring my son would never inherit my struggles. The sound of tires crunching against the gravel driveway pulled me from my thoughts. A sleek silver SUV parked near the front walk. The driver door opened, and Maya stepped out into the morning sunlight. She did not resemble the rigid defensive executive who sat across from me in that tense coffee shop 6 months ago. She shed the heavy protective armor of a woman trapped in a fraudulent marriage. She wore dark denim, a soft cashmere sweater, and classic aviator sunglasses. She carried 2 oversized foam fingers and a stadium-approved clear tote bag. She looked radiant. She looked free. Following the annulment, Maya capitalized on the public momentum of her pristine press release. She resigned from her senior partner position at the old firm and launched her own boutique consulting agency. She stripped away the toxic elements of her life and built an empire under her own name. The front door of my apartment swung open before I could even reach the handle. Leo sprinted past me wearing a bright red baseball jersey and clutching a worn leather catching glove. Maya caught him in a quick, tight hug, swinging him around the porch. She laughed a genuine, unburdened sound that echoed across the quiet neighborhood. She handed him one of the foam fingers and asked if he was ready to catch a foul ball. Leo grinned, displaying a missing front tooth, and nodded eagerly. Society dictates that biology forms the strongest foundation of a family. The American ideal insists that shared genetics equal unconditional loyalty. My lived experience proved the exact opposite. My own brother shared my DNA, and he commodified my youth to fund his luxury car leases. The billionaire real estate titan shared Leo DNA and treated the boy like a public relations liability to be managed by a secret monthly wire transfer. Maya shared 0 genetic material with either of us. The annulment severed her legal ties to my brother. She possessed every right to walk away from the wreckage and never look back. Instead, she chose to stay. She chose to build a relationship with a 9-year-old boy who needed reliable adults in his corner. She transitioned from an unwitting accomplice into a fierce, dedicated aunt figure. She showed up for weekend games, helped him with complex math homework, and offered a steady presence that had nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with choice. I walked out onto the wooden porch, leaning against the railing. Maya looked up and offered a warm, easy smile. She instructed Leo to put his gear in the back seat and buckle up. She walked up the brief flight of stairs to join me on the porch. We stood side by side, watching the boy adjust his seatbelt through the car window. "The federal sentencing paperwork arrived today," I stated, keeping my voice conversational. 15 years. Maya did not flinch. She kept her gaze fixed on the vehicle. "I received the same notification from the victim advocate coordinator," she replied. Her tone held no malice and no regret. It was simply a factual update regarding a closed file. She adjusted her sunglasses. "The auditors finalized the asset seizure last week. The offshore accounts are empty." I nodded. The final remnants of his extortion scheme were scrubbed clean. Maya turned to face me. The morning sunlight caught the edges of her short hair. She asked how I was adjusting to the quiet. I considered her question. The operational manager role at the medical clinic remained demanding, but the motivation behind the work shifted entirely. I no longer accepted extra shifts out of sheer terror of bouncing a utility check. I worked because I valued the routine. The trust fund was locked away, rendering us financially secure for the future, but I refused to let elite wealth alter the grounded reality I spent a decade building for my son. I told Maya the quiet felt foreign, but I was learning to navigate it. I mentioned that waking up without an immediate crisis to solve left a strange, empty space in my daily schedule. She offered a knowing smile. "When you stop fighting for survival, you finally have to figure out what you actually want to do with your life," she said. "It is the hardest part of the victory." She checked her watch and patted my shoulder. She promised to have Leo back before dinner and warned me they might ruin their appetites with stadium hot dogs. I laughed and told her to buy him cotton candy too. I stood on the porch and watched the silver SUV back out of the driveway. Leo rolled down the rear window, waving his foam finger in the air. I raised my hand and waved back until the vehicle turned the corner and disappeared down the tree-lined street. The neighborhood returned to its peaceful weekend silence. I remained on the porch for a long time. I closed my eyes and took a slow, deep breath, pulling the crisp autumn air into my lungs. The physical sensation of safety settled into my bones. The rigid tension I carried in my shoulders since I was 18 years old slowly uncoiled. I thought about the young girl who stood in a cramped college dormitory holding a crying infant while her brother drove away in the dead of night. That girl operated on pure adrenaline and blind sacrifice. She packed her textbooks into cardboard boxes, canceled her meal plans, and traded lecture halls for graveyard shifts at local diners. She buried her resentment under layers of exhaustion just to ensure an innocent child survived. That 18-year-old girl was gone. She forged me into the woman standing on this porch today. I did not regret her choices, but I no longer needed to carry her defensive armor. The debt was paid in full. The predator was locked in a federal cell. The child was safe, happy, and secure. I turned the brass handle and walked back into my apartment. The living room was quiet and orderly. The sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains, casting bright geometric patterns across the hardwood floor. I walked past the kitchen counter and headed toward my small home office in the corner of the room. The space was normally covered in clinic schedules and utility bills. Today the desk surface was entirely clear, except for a single heavy envelope resting precisely in the center of the wooden blotter. I sat down in the desk chair. I did not open the envelope immediately. I simply let my fingers rest against the thick premium paper. I recognized the return address printed in crisp, dark ink in the upper left corner. It was an address I had forced myself to forget 9 years ago. Maya was right. When the war ends and the survival instincts power down, you are forced to look at the blank canvas of your own life. You are forced to answer the question you spent a decade avoiding. I traced the embossed crest on the envelope, knowing the contents inside held the power to close a 9-year circle and ignite an entirely new chapter. My fingers traced the raised ink of the university seal. The dark blue shield of Johns Hopkins University sat stark against the thick cream paper. 9 years ago, a nearly identical envelope arrived in a cramped mailbox at my college dormitory. That first letter contained a full tuition undergraduate scholarship for a pre-medical track. It contained the validation of my entire high school existence. I held it for 3 days before Tyler knocked on my door and handed me a crying infant. I remember dialing the admissions office the morning after Tyler fled. I remember the dial tone. I remember the polite, confused voice of the registrar when I explained I needed to decline the presidential scholarship. The registrar asked if I wanted to defer for a semester. I told her a semester would not fix a broken family. I hung up the phone and packed my textbooks into cardboard boxes. I assumed that door was locked forever. Now a new envelope rested on my desk. I did not slice it open with frantic anticipation. I picked up a simple metal letter opener and slid the blade under the flap with steady, deliberate precision. I pulled out the heavy folded parchment. I unfolded the letter and laid it flat on the wooden blotter. The header did not welcome an 18-year-old girl to an undergraduate dormitory. It addressed a 27-year-old professional woman. Dear Ms. Bennett, the admissions committee for the Bloomberg School of Public Health is pleased to offer you acceptance into the Master of Health Administration program for the upcoming fall cohort. I read the opening paragraph twice. The text continued detailing the specific reasons for my acceptance. The committee noted my exceptional operational leadership managing a private medical clinic. They highlighted the resilience demonstrated in my application essays. They recognized the unique real-world healthcare management experience I acquired while navigating complex insurance systems and hospital night shifts to keep a child alive. The very struggle Tyler forced upon me became the exact credential that set my application apart from thousands of other candidates. I sat back in my chair. The autumn sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, warming the surface of the desk. Tyler engineered a plot to destroy my potential. He viewed my youth and intelligence as a resource he could harvest to facilitate his extortion scheme. He thought placing a newborn in my arms would tether me to poverty and obscurity. He believed he erased my future. I looked at the acceptance letter and then shifted my gaze to a silver-framed photograph resting on the corner of the desk. It was a picture of Leo and me taken last summer at a coastal state park. Leo wore a bright orange life jacket, grinning wide with sea spray in his hair. I had my arms wrapped tightly around his shoulders. We looked unbroken. The profound irony of the situation settled over me. Tyler tried to ruin my life. Instead, his cowardice handed me the greatest gift I will ever receive. I raised a brilliant, compassionate boy who knows he is fiercely loved. The billionaire trust fund designed to